A very good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be. This is Sean.
This is Alex.
And this is Sven.
And we have the original three back together for an exciting episode. I think this may just be one of the most exciting, life-changing episodes. Because this is like the never-ending question, is this a credit or not?
Credit?
We're going to answer that question today.
Yes. Here we go.
And I guess we all have a bit of a different opinion of what is a credit or not. So to figure out who is the biggest CreHo,
who is the biggest
this episode, I'm gonna tally everyone's
counts
count,
the most questionable,
and then we'll see who is like the biggest CreHo at the end.
Questionable credits.
I'm like afraid to see who it is because I've got a feeling I'm like Mr. Credit Humper, but
I think I'm gonna be in the middle. I think I'm gonna
Really?
bridge the gap between you and Sven.
it's true. Well, Sven has told me
Guess
some
we'll find
insights
out.
before, so I guess we'll find out. But before we dive into that, Sven got incredibly lucky, and he just rode Fly in Fantasieland. Tell us, Sven.
Yeah, so beginning of the month, I was wondering, okay, when will I get to fly? And I have a trip still planned in November, if COVID allows it. But I also went on beginning of October, and it was a pretty calm day, so that was good. Started off with a ride on Tron. Not on Tron, but on Terra. I guess I'm also
jealous.
excited for that one.
Yeah.
No, on Terran. And just to remember how it feels like, and then obviously to compare it to Fly. So as it is still soft opening, you first had to queue to get into Rookburg. But luckily the queue was like, oh, hey there, cat. Sorry, my cat is just
We love cats.
just getting
so this is
right
a
into
good
the
break.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to queue up for Rookburg as the area is completely enclosed. Like there are two entrances, but at the moment they only use one because of COVID. But as it was a calm day, I think I waited like 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And then I entered Rookburg. Okay, so how much spoilers can I use here?
Well, we do have a whole podcast.
I mean, to be fair, we have a complete episode that's
Yes.
already live,
Yes.
and you got to listen to that, everyone.
Yeah, so if you want...
this is our plug for that podcast.
Exactly.
The
So
Fly
if you want the
podcast.
full detail, you can listen to our special podcast about Fly and Rookburg with Nadia, our new German member, and also one of our guest hosts. But the ride, I found it very intriguing. Because the area, it's typical Phantasialand. Like, you don't even know how they got to build that. It was, it's so, everything is on top of each other. So they kind of use the same concept of Terran for Fly. And when I first looked at the first concepts of that, the first images that I saw, I was like, well, it's a bit the same thing all over again. So it felt like that at first, but then I started looking around and starting seeing all those details. And that's when I really started to appreciate the area. But of course, then there's the ride itself. And especially in the station, that's the moment when you're like, okay, this is a kind of Vekoma that I've never seen before. Like, is this even Vekoma? They're back in the game, and the restraints, I found them very enjoyable, but I've heard complaints about that, especially people who are a bit taller and a bit larger. They seem to have issues with that and have a not so enjoyable ride, because it is true that once you start flying, your whole body weight just hangs into the harness. So it's a workout.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? This kind of sounds a lot like almost any flying coaster. We've ridden, I think, 3 different kinds of trains, or 4 if you count Folaris, which I like to forget. But like, it is true. Like, it's always like the seating thing really makes or breaks a ride. Sometimes, like, it can be pretty uncomfortable. Like, if I'm not the right click, for example, on the B&M, and I feel my whole body hanging too much forward with too much room. Like, I would really rather be like super tight in flying coasters, to be honest.
I have a limited tolerance for flying coasters. We have Manta on our doorstep. I don't ride it very often. We ride it when we have guests. Basically, when we have people who don't go to SeaWorld often, and we ride it together. And that's how I get my fill. I ride it like once a year.
Well, for leg-wise, let's say, I found it very easy to enter compared to some of the other rides. Like, you don't have the B&M issue that all of a sudden, my leg is not locked in. It's pretty easy. It's very soft, and then all of a sudden it clicks, and you're stuck. So
now, is it hydraulic, or is it like a kind of a ratcheting click system?
The restraint itself is, I heard it's a mixture of both. Like, there is a click system, but it also is a bit hydraulic. It's very heavy to pull down, so.
Okay, that sounds a lot more like hydraulic focus. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so, and the experience itself, it really was what Phantasialand promised. It's a flying experience. They put emphasis on that, and not like, okay, it's a flying type coaster. No, it's a flying experience. That they put a lot of emphasis on that. And there are a lot of cool effects along the way. So, is it my favorite ride at Phantasialand now? No. But it's definitely my favorite flying coaster so far.
Yeah.
See, I'm really excited for that.
That seems to be the I haven't heard anyone say that they choose another flying coaster over it, of the people I know who've ridden it.
Yeah, and I do want to give a shout out to that particular fly episode. We really enjoyed listening to it.
That was
one of our favorites. So
even if you're afraid, if you're listening now and you're like, oh, I want to hear, but I'm afraid of spoilers, there's so many details that you couldn't possibly.
Girl, I already forgot half.
You can't hardly retain all
There's
of
so
it.
much.
It's an enjoyable listen, and I promise that a vast majority of the ride will still be a surprise. When you go
the
ride
funny
it
thing
after
was that
listening to
even
the
the people that had ridden it discovered things during the podcast.
Yeah,
I know, that was the funniest thing, that you guys were literally like live discussing the things that other people missed on the ride.
Not to mention, if you're in America, if you're an American citizen living in America right now, listening to the podcast, you're probably not going to be able to go to Germany for a little bit anyway. So listen to the fly episode and then
live vicariously through Sven, Nadia.
Because by the time you get to Phantasialand, it will have probably been a while since you listened to the podcast.
But the most important question for you, Sven, is fly a credit?
Well, I do think that fly is a credit, yes.
Okay,
but
great.
would it be a different credit if the seats got stuck and you had the whole ride in the same position?
Oh my God,
Sven, you opened the Pandora's box immediately.
Oh my God, yeah. I love those pictures of the pictures of the people who came into the station and they're like at a 90 degree, like sideways, and I'm like, oh,
okay, I would count it
that
because it's so special. I would count it.
Or like you dispatched and it doesn't pivot and you just are flying like sideways the whole way.
I bet there's a sensor that's allowed to turn the launch. That's the case.
Could you imagine seeing that? Though. And like the screams of the people, they're like, "What's going on?
That's wild.
Something is wrong."
It's now Fly.
So we will start with. We have a long list here.
So we have a lot of lists
because we listened to everyone on our Instagram channels and Facebook.
Probing Instagram, and
we even almost threw some virtual hands with some people about this.
Yeah, we've been baiting everyone about like
if we lost you as a fan and you're still listening to this. This is your answer.
For some of the more controversial ones that we've talked about in the past, more people will say that something is a credit now than they used to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is true. I feel
like in certain subjects, I feel like the first time you introduce a ride and say like this is a credit, and someone's like no, it's not, and then maybe like a year later they're like well maybe because now I'm used to the idea. That was at least the case with some of these.
Well, before we start, then, what is your definition of a coaster, Alex?
For me. I like for it to have a primary gravity component, like a beyond a reasonable doubt, largely inertia and kinetic energy based experience. That's not to say that it necessarily has to coast up or coast left or right. A lot of the stuff that I count is gravity driven, but not necessarily on a 3-dimensional plane, as far as the gravity stuff goes. But like, I think the number one thing is, like, I don't personally count powered coasters, but a lot of people do. And I don't have any problem with that, because somewhere along the way, momentum does take over. You've achieved kinetic energy, kinetic propulsion from
that's what's going to kill me.
Sort of a long launch, a long drawn out launch, where the ride is a launch coaster in a very rudimentary sense. But
I'm already struggling.
I never counted powered coasters. Like, I never counted Blauer and Signs because I just never thought to. Now I'm like, well, maybe I wouldn't start. I don't know if I would. But there's some rides that are like kind of in the gray area between a credit and a powered credit. Like if rides that you would definitely count if you counted powered coasters, but not necessarily if you didn't count powered coasters. And those are the ones that are like maybe on the 75 percentile of like definitely more than a powered coaster, but maybe not like a not powered credit. Those are the ones that I think about. Basically, I take everything on a case-by-case basis. But if gravity is a major component, if at one point you feel like you're in the vehicle and it's out of control to some capacity, then I count it.
Okay.
Well, for me, so trying to see if I can make a case here. I do count power coasters personally, because I feel, especially because there's parts of power coasters where these power coasters go faster than electricity can make it go, and that's because they do have topographical changes in height, which lead to its gravity-induced increase in speed. Therefore, I do count them. However, there are a couple of production model kind of attractions that have a gray area that I don't personally count, which we'll get to in a little bit. Even though some people could make the argument that they're powered and then they have a track, and for that reason they could just be a powered coaster too. But the way the vehicle is situated and the kind of production modelness takes that away. If it's
how common it is, if it's like
it kind of comes
really
down to like
prevalent.
Well, if it has turns and it's powered and it has gravity induced things, then I would count it. But I wouldn't necessarily count it if it's just like a very basic track layout, because at the end of the day, almost every single kind of attraction uses a track of some sort. As
we
like
don't
want to
pad our counts. We're not trying to count stuff just to make our numbers higher, because I don't really talk
but
about
I will generally count, I think, a little bit more. And I will say that the most exciting kinds of credit counts are those that you discover are coasters when you ride them. So we'll get to that. How about you, Sven?
Well, I think obviously there's also the gravity component for me, to define that if it's a coaster or not. But for me also the track is important, and I might contradict myself then at some points, but I think I'm mostly focused on the track when it comes to coasters, and that's why for me powered coasters are also coasters, because like if you have a child with you and you'll show, okay, what is this, they'll say it's a coaster because of the typical track.
The track bed,
the two rails, and then connection. Of course, there's single rail coasters and things like that. But and I also find it important that there is someone to operate the coaster. That's why I don't. Well, we'll touch upon it as well. But there are some kind of playground type things that people
glorified
consider
playground
a coaster.
Equipment.
And then I'm like, no.
No, you don't count those? Okay, this is wild.
Sean is already declaring himself a loser.
Same thing for me. I am not a credit whore at all. Well, no, that's not true. But
I was gonna say Sean and I are both looking at each other like,
I went to parks and I did not ride certain coasters at that park because I didn't want to wait for like a kiddie coaster.
That's fair.
I think I remember.
I've left credits on the table for reasons.
Not at Knott's Berry Farm that I skipped one Or maybe at Six Flags Magic Mountain.
Coaster.
Well, Timberline Twister has a height cap at Knott's.
Yeah.
Well, but he's not that. He's not too tall for that. I'm like barely too tall.
Okay. Yeah, we may have just skipped that one.
It may have been
Sander might not.
Like it sometimes happens that there's like this kiddie coaster. I remember at Gardaland. I remember at Parque de Atracciones Madrid. I was like, well, no.
You know what? I want to give you a shout out, Sven, because I used to be like, every credit counts. I have to go ride every possible credit. But then that one time, I think like 3 years ago or something, it was like about a year into ECK existing, you and I had a conversation about how you don't really care that much about getting on all the credits because you'd rather just rewrite the more important attractions.
Exactly.
And like I have adjusted my mindset traveling to that. I would much rather just skip a kiddie coaster somewhere and just rewrite another attraction. Yeah. And especially in countries where operations are a hit or miss, I just go in with that mindset where I'm like, I'm just excited to ride whatever I can get.
Yeah.
And I will gladly rewrite something that I won't be able to ride ever again or not in a couple of years. Then I would ride a kiddie coaster.
Like, we didn't ride the kiddie coaster at Happy Valley Shenzhen because we wanted to make a head start
on
to
getting
Night
to OCT.
Valley.
Yeah, so I did actually get that mentality from you, Sven. So there you go. Look at you.
Aww,
and like
nice.
the frog coaster, Froshbahn at Byron Park. I didn't ride it because it was going to be my 400th credit, and I wanted a better coaster. So I left Froshbahn on the table, and I'll have to ride it. You know, I'd go back to Byron Park. That was a cute park.
The thing is, you guys know that I'm a collector, but I also know that certain things you just can't collect everything. So I prefer to have like the highlights of a certain collection, things that are special. And that's the same way with coasters for me. Like in Europe, I know I won't be able to visit all parks, but I have this list of parks that I want to do because I know that there's something unique. Not necessarily a coaster, but because of the atmosphere. Like Futuroscope is a great example because before there was not even a coaster, now there is. But I would have visited the park even though there's not a credit. Puy de Fou, same thing. It's like on my list. Even though there's no rides or anything, but it's still a theme park. But yeah.
Futuroscope is a park that like people in America do not know about until now because they have a coaster.
Well, I kind of consider the Epcot of Europe. I mean, it was like Future World, except for they kept up with it versus Epcot where the Future World just died out.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited for that to no longer be a thing.
Did you see that they're going to invest heavily in the next few years?
Yeah, I saw that. I'm excited for them.
Yeah, they'll add a trackless water ride simulator thing, and
a Nautic Jet.
Say that again.
Well,
a Sun Kid Nautic Jet. Is that what they're adding?
I'm not sure. But
could this be something like
in the future as well? But no details were revealed.
I heard that. Now, could this trackless water ride thing be something like Aquatopia? That's a trackless water ride.
It might be that kind of ride system, but then actually more of a dark ride than a flat ride.
That sounds really fun. I'm excited. That sounds really cool.
And with screens.
I would love to like...
the concept that I saw was like it was surrounded by screens, so that's typical for Futuroscope because there's a lot of screen-based rides there, but that's like their trademark. But it looked like an interesting concept for sure. I'm
excited. You know what else I'm excited about? Let's dive into this list. So we're going to start
without further ado
with a really basic one to introduce. It's going to be about dueling coasters. Do you count both sides as individual credits? Or if some cases like Steeplechase, there's 3 tracks. Do you count all 3? Or are we saying, well, it's one attraction, it has one name on the park map, it's going to be one credit?
Sven, for me, it's easy. Like, if you move one of the rides in another park, you'll count it as a credit. So for me, they're credits.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah. Steeplechase was talked about on
the UK
podcast, and I felt like someone watching sports at home, like yelling at the TV, like, "Oh my god!"
And now they're yelling at us.
And you brought me up, and I'm like, Sven you knew exactly how I would be reacting to all of that. But yeah, Steeplechase is 3 credits. I will tattoo it on my forehead for people to understand.
I'd rather have a job, but yeah.
It's 3 credits. It's 3 unique roller coaster experiences with 3 control panels. You can operate 1 or 2 or all 3 simultaneously.
Yeah.
in any configuration.
When it comes to that, I completely agree. Mm-hmm. If it is a non-Mobius, I want to add that. If it's non-Mobius, so both sides operate independently, like you could technically dispatch a train on each side independently with no problems, then yes, it is definitely 2 credits. However, if it's like a Mobius coaster where the train ends up at another station, or like Racer at Kennywood, or even stuff like, well, I guess West Coast Races doesn't have 2 stations, but if it were to have 2 stations, it would just be 1 credit.
Yeah.
So
Mobius coasters are
1. Is
1
credit. Or 2 credits?
It's definitely credit. 1.
It doesn't even have 2 stations; it only has 1 station.
You only have to wait in line for it once.
Yeah,
it's not like Grand National where you have to wait in line and get one half, and then wait in line and get the other.
But it's only 1 credit. So if you miss one, you miss one.
Yeah.
Some people say half a credit.
Some people said when we were in Mexico riding La Montaña Rusa, they were like, "You got to ride both sides, or you don't have the credit." We're kind of laughing because it was funny, but then in our heads we were like, "Yeah, we better ride both sides because if not, you'll always feel."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, then it's not 2 credit, but it's half the ride, so you only get half the credit.
Half the credit, and then it's
But a half rounded up is still 1.
Well, so when I rode the first time I rode 13 at Alton Towers, I got evacuated halfway through the ride.
Yeah,
and it was closed for several hours, and I'm like, do I have the credit or do I have half of the credit?
This is why you take selfies on rides, so no one can be like, "Oh, you." I
took lots of pictures from that incident because it was pretty memorable. It was at the top of the drop track, and we got to walk down the maintenance stairs. It was cool. And the ride did reopen, and I did get the other half of my credit. So
yay! But I have to admit that I used to I have a coaster count, and I used to have both credits for Grand National. Mm-hmm. But before I went into this podcast, I wanted to be sure that my credit list was correct. With
the grand restructuring.
So then I decided, yes, it's only 1 credit.
Yeah.
Because indeed, it's.
And I guess even if you rode just one side of Grand National and you counted it, I wouldn't take issue to that. Just think about other rides with multiple stations, like a train ride. If you rode one half of the Disneyland Express, you could you still rode it. Mm-hmm. You didn't not ride it if you didn't ride the entire length of the Disneyland Express or Railroad or whatever. Yeah, the Disneyland Railroad. So,
that's a good analogy. Yeah.
So we agree that Matterhorn is 2 credits, right?
Definitely.
Matterhorn's
oh my God,
credits. Yes. So is Space Mountain.
Yeah, Space Mountain here in Orlando is 2 credits.
2 credits.
Primeval Whirl, rest its soul.
2 credits.
Was 2 credits.
Oh, yeah, because I think the criticism from people who only count it as 1 is that it's identical track.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's mostly the people that will criticize when the tracks are exactly identical.
Yeah.
Which I get for dueling Wild Miles, but for rides like Matterhorn, which is completely 2 different rides, that definitely is not a valid argument.
Well, you know how we theorize about it's 2 credit? Some people would say that a ride like Primeval Whirl is just 1 credit, even if you ride both sides. Lightning Loops at Six Flags Great Adventure was the 2-track Arrow Shuttle Loop, and some people probably counted it as 1 credit for both sides. Other people counted it as 2, but then it closed, and the 2 loops went to 2 different parks and reopened, which takes out the hypothetical question of how you would count it, because obviously if you went to Six Flags America and rode the upper loop and then went to Frontier City and rode the lower loop, that's 2 credits. Which means if they're 2 credits now, they were 2 credits in New Jersey.
Well, as we touch upon this subject, a relocated coaster, is it 1 or 2 credits?
A relocated coaster
I don't
is
count
1
relocated.
credit.
No.
Still the same ride.
Yeah.
Unless, which opens another Pandora's box we'll get to later, unless there's a significant rolling stock change, say they get special trains for it and it runs backwards.
Or a major reprofiling.
Or a major reprofiling. Then it just kind of depends on the project.
Case by case.
Really. But generally speaking, if it's, trains move along with the track and they get rebuilt somewhere else, it is not a new credit. It's the same ride.
Deja Vu at Magic Mountain was 1 credit, and then it moved to Six Flags New England. And even though it has new trains and the ride experience changed for the worst because it sucks now, I still just count it as 1 credit.
Yeah, I think I did too. Yeah.
Because I was not having a good time.
Like, there's only one relocated coaster that I've ridden. It's in Bobby Allen. Speedy Bop used to have 2 Wild Mouse coasters, and one of them got moved to Parque de Atracciones Madrid. The loading procedure was totally different, but it was still the same coaster, you know.
Oh, that's another good example. That's just like Lightning Loops. It was 2 Wild Mice side by side at one park. Now only one of them is there, and the other one moved to a different park. So if it's 2 credits at 2 parks now, it was 2 credits when they were both in the same park.
Next up are Alpine coasters. Before the episode, I talked with the 3 of us for a little bit, and I didn't quite realize how controversial this topic was, because like all over social media channels, people were mentioning that they were either not counting Alpine coasters or were counting Alpine coasters. So for me, it's always been a credit, because as it goes downhill, especially on the European ones, like there's no magnetic braking on the older ones. Like they're all like hand powered, as where in the US there's a lot more magnets along the track. To help with spacing, and lawsuits. So how do you guys count them?
I count them.
Yeah, me too. I think the reason why it is even a subject is because Roller Coaster Database did not used to count them. I always tell people, like, we love Roller Coaster Database, but always take everything with a grain of salt. There's a lot of people who, if you argue that something's a credit, their counter argument is like, well, it's not a Roller Coaster Database. And I'm like, well, mountain coasters weren't on Roller Coaster Database either. But we all knew they were coasters. They were coasters before Roller Coaster Database acknowledged them, and they're coasters after. They didn't spontaneously become credits just because Roller Coaster Database decided to start entering them into the database. So
totally.
People have to be their own advocate for things that are credits. There's rides on Roller Coaster Database that are counted as credits, and then very similar rides that are not counted as credits for some reason. Like, I mean, we'll touch on this more, but like the Blauer Ensigns, the Mag Blauer Ensigns are all credits, are all powered coasters in the database, except for like the High in the Sky Seuss Trolley Tram ride at Universal Studios or at Islands of Adventure here in Orlando. It's a Mag Blauer Ensign, but because it's a repurpose of an existing monorail style attraction, for whatever reason, it slipped under the radar. But for all mechanical
there's quite a bit of that
purposes,
because there's also
it's a powered coaster.
There's also the Power Splash of Plopsaland de Panne, which is literally like a Max Super Splash, but with a different sort of elevator system, and it's not on RCDB as where the other ones are.
All of the like the one at like Europa Park is counted, and like the Chinese knockoffs.
Yeah, but those have the backwards hill, right?
Yeah,
so it's not a and. So in Plopsa, indeed, it's an elevator, and then you only have a track section down with a little hump. So there is gravity.
But there is
a
coasting and down coasting.
So for me, it counts. Yeah. But in Cinecittà World in
Italy,
Italy, they also have a more... It's also the Super Splash style ride, but it's more in a water ride setting, and I don't think it's on RCDB.
Probably not. We just noticed on the Mac website that they've got the Super Splash rides listed in the product lines, and we noticed that the Plopsa de Panne one is in there with all of the other ones that are counted as credits on Roller Coaster Database, and yet the Plopsa one's not counted.
Just generally speaking, there are people that consider these Power Splashes, no matter which version, whether it's the largest one at Chamlang Ocean Kingdom or the smallest one at Plopsa, there are people that consider all of those just water rides. But I would say that I would consider all of them, especially if they have the same type of boat, which they do, and the same kind of track, they're all credits for me.
That's kind of... Okay, so that to touch on that, so... Everyone remembers, in the U.S. anyway, they remember Shoot the Rapids at Cedar Point.
That was actually one that came up quite a bit.
And Pilgrim's Plunge at Holiday World. They're both gone now. Since building those rides, I mean, at the time, nobody really asked themselves if they thought it was a coaster. They were flume rides, they were shoot the chutes, it's whatever. Since then...
Intamin to that exact product,
Intamin has taken that product line, and the one at Energylandia, and then there's another one in Mirabilandia, Divertical.
Yeah.
It's the same product line and the same elevator, the same drop as Pilgrim's Plunge, and again, the same product line as Shoot the Rapids at Cedar Point. But those are credits, and Roller Coaster Database counts them accordingly because they go down into the splash pool and then up into their little helix and around. So after those opened and I saw that Roller Coaster Database listed them, I retroactively counted Pilgrim's Plunge and Shoot the Rapids because they're the same ride system.
Now, I'm going to ask a question here. Would we make a differentiation between, say, Pilgrim's Plunge, which literally had the flume and a drop only, not even like any uphill coasting, and then the newer ones that have actual track bits to it? Would you say, like, well, I'm only going to count the ones that have actual roller coaster track, or are you going to count everything because it's the same product line?
I mean, because it's the same product line, I would count it. Pilgrim's Plunge, I forget exactly how it looked, but I think the drops, I mean, they probably did change the track bed with the newer versions. I haven't taken a close look at it. I just know that the boats are the same, and the elevator system is the same, and I just didn't really think twice about it. I'm like, oh, I guess... Because then I thought about it, and like thinking back to Shoot the Rapids, I'm like, oh, I guess this is kind of like their version of a Mack water coaster, because the boats are buoyant and they float around, but then they have their lift hill system that pulls them out of the water and loads them into the track bed like a Mack water coaster. So at the time, I was just happy to have ridden it because Shoot the Rapids was a total disaster, and it was not open very much, very often. I was there for 3 days, and it was open for maybe half an hour over the course of a 3-day weekend, and I rode it. We were the last ones on it before it broke down. And so really, I didn't even ask myself if I thought it was a coaster. I was just happy to ride it because it was, at the time, a fairly new ride.
Now, how about those suspended alpine kind of coasters? Sven listed one here, Hummel Bummel, which I'm actually not familiar with. But we've ridden a couple of those in the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, there's the suspended...
Rowdy Bear one.
Rowdy Bear suspended coaster with the laser guns in Pigeon Forge.
The one I listed is indeed Hummel Bummel, and it's the second coaster by Weekend, which is inverted. Remember the first one?
Of these.
Oh, yeah.
Vertigo.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Vertigo at Walibi, Belgium, unfortunately, was not a success.
No.
But
that looks like a fun park.
This one is new, Hummel Bummel in Schwaben Park for this year. And it's also, you can control your speed a little bit. But yeah.
Does it have a lift hill, or is it like launched or powered?
I think it's a bit powered.
I
only saw an on-ride.
It looks
and it's
a lot like, because this looks really similar. The one in Pigeon Forge is also a vegan, and it has a lift hill.
But it has like an actual coasting section all the way down.
And then it just drifts all the way down. It's like more of a credit than... Yeah. I don't know anyone that doesn't count the Pigeon Forge one as a credit, because it's unlike the Alpine coasters, you can't control the brakes or anything on this. That seems to be the one defining thing about people who don't count Alpine coasters. It's like, well, you can stop it yourself. You can hit the brakes. Why that's a make or break issue for a credit, I don't know. But it is for some people, whereas the suspended coaster version in Pigeon Forge does not have any sort of vehicle control from the driver perspective, other than you get to shoot laser guns at targets on the track.
I mean, shout out to Schwaben Park for having the weirdest credits.
Schwaben looks so
It has
so it looks like that one has doesn't have a particular lift though. It seems like it makes
Does it have like a magnetic portion that takes you to the highest part?
It keeps going up and down, up and down, up and down. So
so it's like a series of lifts.
So it's a little bit different than what we rode.
Yeah. I love vegan.
I would count it.
Vegan.
It looks like a coast for like half the ride, and so I would count it personally.
Well, you would count it because you count powered coasters. I would probably count it because it's unique.
Well, I also think there's parts where there's no mechanics in it. Like, it is coasting down.
It looks like a series of magnetic lift hills and drops where there are no nags involved, and that's enough for me.
Okay.
Again, it's all about...
on the suspended topic, what about Arthur?
Suspended
powered coaster, yeah. That's a credit.
Suspended, I both counted.
We have not... Well, I might, because remember we rode the BSA ripoff in China called Magic Garden or something. And Guangzhou Sunac, totally a credit. It had a real coaster part at the end with uphill coasting, laterals. A lot of it was a lengthy powered lift hill with some suspended. There was scenes and stuff. It was cute. It was definitely funny to ride it, knowing that it was based on Arthur, but not having ridden Arthur. So it was a totally unique experience for us. And when we did our manufacturer showcase, that was the one we talked about the most for BSA because it was by far the most interesting BSA coaster we'd ridden, which BSA stands for Beijing.
So now at this point, you have to make your call because I'm keeping track of this.
Yeah, I would count it.
So you counted Arthur?
Yeah, well, I would. I would assume that I would count Arthur because I counted the BSA ripoff, and I would assume that Arthur. I've seen videos of Arthur. I haven't done a POV of it because I don't want to spoil it for myself. But I would assume that there's very coaster, traditional coaster bits in that ride, just like the one that we rode in Guangzhou Sidak.
My last experience with Arthur was pretty interesting because I had a virtual queue. Which is pretty new for Europa Park to offer that.
That is.
So they have it for some rides, and then all of a sudden it's available, and then all of a sudden it isn't anymore. But we had one.
Yeah.
And they have the cleaning routine because of COVID. That all
right.
I didn't time when it happened, but it just happened that they cleaned all the trains. And then there was a bunch of guests that were on the ride, and right before that the train would leave the station, they had put down their mask. But right before you leave the station, that's where the control area is. So they stopped the ride, they started arguing, and so we already waited for quite a while, and then again the whole ride was stopped because of these people, because they kept complaining and they kept not putting on their mask. And finally they exited the ride, they kept on arguing, but luckily the ride could continue again. So I was like, oh, poor people in the regular queue, because they had already been waiting so long, and the queue was pretty huge, just because some people didn't want to wear the mask. And I was like, oh, God.
Were they American?
No, they were French.
Oh!
Sorry, French people.
There's a reason that the French side of Belgium is called new cases.
Wow.
Sorry, man.
Ooh. Okay.
So next up, also powered, we're just going to stay on the topic.
Hang on. There was one Alpine coaster that I still wanted to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
And that's Dawson Duel at Bellewether.
Yeah, we have that one here.
So that's a dueling Alpine coaster.
It's actually a sport coaster. It's a different product line because there are no handbrakes on it.
So
there are no handbrakes, and it's not on terrain. It's literally
it's a
elevated,
man-made superstructure.
Right.
From the
so
ground,
fun.
and it's quite a walk up there.
It's like a water slide
so
walk.
wouldn't, based on our previous agreements that Alpine coaster credits and that dueling two separate coaster credits, I would just count them as 2 credits.
Yeah, definitely. And for anyone that doesn't count Alpine coasters because of the handbrakes, once you start riding sport coasters, which are literally the same thing except you have no handbrakes, then I would ask you the same question. Like, is it a credit now because there's Alpine coasters where you can't control the brakes, yes or no? I mean, I can't answer for anyone, but I would assume that they would say yes, because if that was what was holding them back from credit hood before, this has eliminated the only thing that wouldn't. So
fair enough. Next up, we have Bob Carts.
Also Wagen. Or Wagen.
Like,
how are we pronouncing it?
Maximus Blitzbahn, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, the one in Toverland.
That's it.
There's one at Nagashima Spa Land that was really fun.
Road one in Night Valley, OCT East.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. How could I forget?
With all the dead animals.
The peacock inside of a cage the size of a refrigerator.
It was quite awful.
It's fine.
But
it's totally
it was
fine.
still... I count it as a credit because it's kind of like a powered coaster.
Yeah, if you count powered coasters, I don't see why you wouldn't count a Bob Cart.
Instead of the power part being like right below the train, it's right next to the train.
It's like a powered Mack bobsled, but an individual vehicle.
But you also have the ones where you have the same pipe system, but that you have like this little thing that you need to carry yourself, and then
the Alpine slides.
Yeah.
Alpine slide, yeah. Do you count that then?
I don't, because I'm the one putting in the power.
If you have to carry your own vehicle up to the top, then it's a slide.
Okay.
Or like the Park City bobsled run outside of Salt Lake City, where you ride an actual bobsled down the Olympic bobsled track, but in order to take it to the top, they have to put the bobsled in the back of a pickup truck and drive it to the top. And so for me, I'm like, ooh, okay, it's not a credit. I'm sorry. For me. I know people who did count it, and they have every right to.
For that reasons, I do not count Maximus Blitzbahn as a coaster. Because
Interesting.
for
Okay.
me, it doesn't make a difference if it's powered. For me, as I mentioned, it's the track, and that is not a coaster track.
So how about bobsled coasters then? How about the Mack bobsled coaster, or
what about like Bob
an
at Efteling?
Intamin bobsled coaster?
Well, did you see the lift hill? That is a coaster track.
Well, yes, true. But
Okay.
bob
That could
carts,
be
what if it was a launched
differentiation.
bobsled? Like a bob cart. It's a
Launched?
powered launched bobsled.
It would still need an actual
That
track.
would be
normally.
an
Trying to be
interesting ride.
stabilized, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you count bob carts? You don't, right?
No, because I don't. Well, I don't count normal. If I'm just saying, like, if
I'm
I counted
losing
flower
him.
and signs, if I counted flower and signs, I would count it. Like, I would be like, okay, this is a powered coaster. It's as much of a powered coaster as something with like a traditional track bed, but not the ones that are just the downhill carts. Because
Okay. Well, then let's talk about regular powered coasters,
like Blower and sign.
like Blauer Ensigns, like
Yeah. There's some really good ones that I've ridden.
like Max and Moritz, for example. Which
that's a
That would be
Dueling.
2 credits if you count
Well,
Yeah.
if you count powered, but it's 0 for me.
Sven counts though, right?
I do count them.
I
You
count
whore.
too.
It's okay.
That's okay. I'm still the biggest whore here, so
Yeah.
that's cool.
But why do
Now we
you
have a
count them
separation
then,
of hornas.
Alex? Because you said it yourself that at some points they do have that there's some gravity involved.
It's because I never started them. I never counted them from the start, and at this point in my credit collecting, I'm just not worried about it. Like once you hit a certain number, it just I don't have the energy to go back and consider all of the powered coasters that I've ridden or the ones that I might have skipped because I wasn't counting them at the time.
You're not
And
a
I'm
great
just not worried
collector,
about it.
then.
No, I guess not.
Trust me, we have too many
Except for
collector items here.
keychains. but-
Yeah,
Exactly.
keychains, broken hearts,
Oof, girl,
feral cats.
rescued cats.
So Sean and I, yes, you know.
Yeah, no.
So as of right now,
Unless
we're all
it's like-
separated by one.
Unless it's something really, really unique, but a Blauer Ensign, even a custom one,
Well,
not
Max
for
and
me.
Moritz is pretty unique.
It's a Blauer Ensign for me. So,
For me.
but if it was like dual GP at Suzuka Circuit in Nagoya, which is sort of powered, it has like magnetic powered uphill portion, but then it has drops and pinch brakes and a beautiful 3-rail tubular steel track bed, and it's racing. It's a dueling coaster with 2 tracks, so it's 2 credits for me.
But we'll get to that in a little
Yeah,
bit.
we'll
That's
talk to
later
them
on
later,
in this list of things.
That's just an example of like a super special powered coaster that's sort
It's
of a
kind of a
powered
launch
coaster,
coaster.
but also, yeah, it's also kind of a launch coaster.
Now, a funny one that really got me thinking was funfair coasters that are hard to track.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there are funfair coasters, and I count funfair coasters, you know, because it could just be like a classic Cyclone model. But what if it's at another funfair, and it's, I don't know how
If
to
you
tell
count
them apart.
relocations and then count the credit every time it relocates, that makes you a coaster slut.
No, I'm not
Yes.
saying I would do that, but I'm saying, like,
You're no
I-
longer a coaster
I
whore.
could
You're
be
just a
riding this
coaster slut.
Cyclone, and then like years later go to another fun fair where the
Yeah.
same showman has that same Cyclone on, but I had no clue that's the same
Yeah.
Cyclone. Then I would maybe accidentally count as 2, but generally speaking, I wouldn't.
Some people
They're just hard
record
to
the
track.
serial numbers on the control panel. Darren
Well,
Perry does that.
I don't know about the serial numbers, but I just track them on Coaster Count, I guess. And
Or
for
Twitter.
example, there was a spinning wild mouse that is now, if it's still there, on one of the piers at Blackpool. And at some point it was at Plopsaland during the winter. So
Oh, cool. Okay.
I didn't ride it, one, because it was closed, but even if it would have been open, I would have ridden it because I already had the credit. And
Yeah.
why would I pay again to
Yeah,
ride
totally.
something again that you have
Now,
everywhere?
how about dragon wagons? Those are popular on fun fairs.
Wait,
you guys,
what?
I don't know.
Dragon
Like,
wagon?
Dragon wagon?
like powered ones?
Yeah, well, I guess they're powered.
I mean, those fall in the Blauer Ensign category.
Yeah, I guess it's true.
For me, an interesting. I had an
one,
interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Tokyo Express. It's probably something like that.
Like,
it was a powered-
Orient
Yeah, like
Express
Oriental
Little coaster.
Express.
with the little dragon ones, or acceleration station.
Yeah,
That one's
they're all
actually a
like the same
credit because
ones.
it's just a tire-driven lift hill. I had an interesting conversation when I was in Germany riding Olympia looping with a good friend of mine, and he's a total credit whore. He loves a good wacky worm. His name is Charles. He doesn't count, well, at least at the time, he didn't count Olympia looping as a credit
Why?
because it's a traveling coaster. He said that he does not, if it's a traveling coaster, if it's not situated in a stationary park when he rides it, if it's like a powered coaster that's been purchased by a park and is permanently set up, then yes.
That's weird though,
because but he did not count Olympia looping
Superman
at the time.
Ultimate Escape and Superman Ultimate Flight at Discovery Kingdom is set up so they can move it.
Yeah.
It literally has a different support structure. But then there's also all these old Schwarzkopf loopers and stuff. Yeah. They're all made to be moved.
Well, yeah, that's what he said. He's like, once
if it's in a park, you count it. But if it's not a park,
if a traveling Schwarzkopf like Vienna looping, comes home to rest at a park in Mexico, Selva Magica, then it's a credit. But if you rode it when it was a fair circuit ride or something, then he doesn't count it.
Like, I respect everyone's opinion, but that's like saying an apple
I respect
turned into applesauce, then it's not an apple anymore. No, it's still apple.
That's such a beautiful analogy.
Like,
oh my God.
Looping is a coaster. That's it.
You turned this potato into vodka, and now it's not a potato anymore.
But that's true, though.
Not according to Charles.
Okay, Charles, you definitely have a unique opinion. Let's just say that.
Charles,
that's
we love
true.
You. It came up because we rode Olympia looping twice in the same trip in 2 different locations. And some of my more whorish friends counted it twice.
And then he didn't count it at all. And you were like, well,
Charles didn't count it at all. I counted it once. And on my spreadsheet, I have the location that I rode at first, which was in Dusseldorf, and then the second location, which was in Krenger. And that was within 2 weeks of each other.
For me,
that was
when I counted the first time I ride it at one park, and then if it travels to another park, it's still that one coaster.
I was so happy.
I agree with that. No, I'm agreeing with Sven. Yeah.
I was so happy when Olympia Looping got its residencies at Vienna Prater, because then it finally got a roller coaster database page.
Mm-hmm.
Because prior to that, they didn't consider it, like it was outside of the database jurisdiction. But Olympia Looping and Holland Blitz, which I rode in Hamburg, is also really fun. That's a great traveling coaster too.
Now it's in Serengeti Park, I think.
Holland Blitz is?
I think so.
I would go there. That was such a cool ride. It has like fire and lasers and stuff. An indoor traveling coaster with fire.
That was cool.
What could go wrong? Okay.
Another one that's very interesting is a rolling stock change.
Okay.
Meaning if trains change and alter the experience, yes, no. Everyone gets a chance at this because I think there's a lot of gray area.
Well, while we were talking about Deja Vu earlier, where that one relocated and got new trains, and I still would only count it as one credit.
Mm-hmm.
That's because the ride experience wasn't significantly altered.
It was significantly worsened.
Yeah,
it was altered because
I'm talking about it's still a suspended coaster,
but it's still an
inverted
coaster with
Because some examples we have listed here, for example, is Patriot at California's Great America,
or Rubaroo
at Cedar
Point,
or Firebird.
See, these trains, like the experience is significantly altered because it went from standing up to an experience where you're sitting down.
The classification of the ride has changed.
Exactly, it's like changing the ride type.
Yeah.
So I count that as an extra.
Or like Vampire at Chessington, and then becoming a floorless suspended coaster. I would count it as 2, probably. I only wrote it as a floorless coaster. That's already harder for me. That one's a bit. I know that's more gray area, but for me personally, because I never rode it with the Aero trains, but based on how Aero trains ride, and then based on how my experience on Vampire was, I'd probably count it twice, just because I just love that ride, and I would like to have it in my list twice.
Sven, have you ridden Dreamcatcher with both trains?
No, just the suspended one.
Got you.
The free ones.
Floorless.
I missed those airplane trains, which were immortalized in Roller Coaster Tycoon. I want to know, where are those trains, Sven? Do you know? Are they in storage? Because they're beautiful. They belong in a museum.
Yeah, they look cute.
They were so cute.
Now, what about a ride like Steel Dragon, where it went from Morgan trains, which were boxy, shared bench, 6 passenger
3 bench trains,
to B&M custom trains that have completely freedom in seating, have a clamshell
2 bench, 4 passenger.
Clamshell,
no walls,
restraint.
Almost no front or back.
I hear you guys explaining why it is a different credit.
I wouldn't have counted it.
No,
I wouldn't have. We only rode it with the B&M trains, but like if if like Wild Thing at Valley Fair suddenly got B&M trains or
I
something.
wouldn't either because the seating position is still pretty the same.
Yeah.
You're still sitting. You
And
know?
a vast improvement in trains, or like
definitely more comfortable.
Revolution at Magic Mountain went from being a disaster with those Frankenstein shoulder harnesses to having rolling stock with no shoulder harnesses again.
Because but also like if you look at Piton, for example, Efteling, it's on its fourth set of rolling stock.
Yeah.
The rolling stock aren't going to make any credit because I'm still sitting in the same seating position.
That's a great segue, though.
Yeah.
But what I would count, unless you're saying you got something to add to this?
Yes.
Well, there was one example that someone on social media entered there, and that's Hagrid. And that I found
Jason Nicky said that to me, too. For me, it's one credit whether you sit in the sidecar or on the bike, because I don't think that the seating positions are that dramatically
people are too
different.
focused on the fact that it's themed to a motorcycle, but unlike Tron or the Vekoma motorbike, you're sitting right up. Like there's not much of a difference. There's two lap bars. Yeah. It's lap bar and lap bar.
Yeah.
And you're still a little bit of a,
it's a slight elevation difference, but it's not any more. It's still it's not as dramatic as riding in the front seat versus the back seat. That's still a more dramatic experience.
It would have been a different story if, like, we were going to talk about Tron in a handy car, where you have a handy car where you sit upright, you have a regular lap bar, or you're like literally laying on your stomach like a flying coaster on
and
Tron.
that we count as one.
That we still count as one, but that is much more of an argument to be made.
But yeah, that one,
the
seat, the vehicle at the back, which is just normal seating in a lap bar, that's a totally different feeling than riding the motorcycle on Tron, because that is a true... you are splayed out, laying on top of this vehicle.
Your feet are being held up.
Whereas Hagrid's two seating options are really more about height. And they have a very slight difference, I think, in experience, but not enough for me to feel like.
Yeah, but that's a good one, because there was an argument about that on social media. But about Piton, Piton is one of the unique coasters in the world whose track got 95%.
Yeah.
Got replaced by a different kind of track. And some parts of the ride were actually altered a little bit to make it a smoother ride experience. For example, the entrance to the corkscrews, and then the shape of the loops were slightly adjusted, which is why sports look also funny.
Yeah, the loops are a little more squat.
It did use the original footers, but it's completely,
only the lift hill on the station.
And the drop. Our original track.
Yeah.
So the question is, do you count that as a new credit?
Yes.
Sven?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
I'm so proud of you, Sven. Yes, okay, great.
Yes,
now we're on the same page.
It applies for Python. It applies for Eurosat Can Coaster, because it is also the same, almost the same layout, but it's a totally different ride, built up from scratch.
They did a full teardown rebuild. Space Mountain in Anaheim did that in 2005.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if the majority of your ride is a completely new track, like you're rolling on a train on a different coaster technically, right? Because the coaster has been replaced by the same copy of it, pretty much. Then I think it's a new credit. Yeah.
And then there's Phantom's Revenge, which got the second half was completely demolished and rebuilt by a different company to make it a non-looping coaster,
like an alteration of the layout.
So that's another credit. And then Morgan Manufacturing came back a few years later and demolished everything else, or the park demolished everything else that was old Aero Track and replaced it with Morgan Track. I still only count it as 2 credits. Still Phantom,
but you could have made that
Revenge.
3 if you wanted, because it had 3
someone
faces.
could say, well, I rode the first half of the ride was still Aero Track up until like 2005 or 6, and then Morgan came in and replaced everything that wasn't. If I'm not mistaken, they even replaced the track on the lift hill. I think everything is replaced except for the station and the maintenance bay for the track next to it.
I think the first drop still looks like an arrow, but you may be right.
Well, I know the first drop was rebuilt, because the first 2 drops were in need of reprofiling, and you can it's easy to tell because the cross ties are so different.
Well, the first drop looks different to me than the second drop, but I haven't ridden it, so I can't
the cross ties for the Morgan track look like Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom or Tennessee Tornado, whereas the old Aero Track, looks like Viper. So it's easy to see. It's really highlighted by the maintenance bay, which is next to the station, because the exit goes right around it, and you can kind of admire the old Aero Track there for a moment and take selfies with it.
Now, if we're going to talk about like differing of track layouts, it's a thing with wooden coasters where it's a lot easier to just take part of a ride and make it a different kind of ride.
Wooden coasters get reprofiled
in the
all
US.
the time.
It's done quite a bit. So the wooden box is a whole different box. I guess we'll open it up now. We'll start with Ghost Rider, which went from being a CCI regular kind of wooden coaster
with PTC
trains, then got completely retracked, got the midcourse taken out, drop was made steeper, some elements were slightly adjusted to be smoother.
Yep.
Ride experience vastly changed. Completely, like, it's a completely different ride. It's almost like you build, like Troy or Gold Striker, but had a different layout, right? So I count it as a new credit because, like, nothing about what I'm riding on, whether it's my seat or whether it's the track I'm riding, is the same.
To me, I find it as almost as dramatic as like an RMC.
Yeah, except for the one with like rerouting.
Obviously, RMC becomes a steel coaster. You put inversions and shit in it, but I feel like the dramatic change in experience from before Ghost Rider before. I mean, they lopped off like the whole track bed. They demolished the track bed down to the stilts. It was just sticks poking out of the ground. So even if the change wasn't that dramatic for us, it is because of the change in rolling stock and the reprofiling. It's so smooth. They use that Ipe lumber.
Do we know how much Knott's Berry Farm paid for that?
Probably a lot.
At once upon a time, I knew the price tag. But it was definitely
probably the price of a new coaster
because they did get 3 completely new trains. Because trains are expensive.
Yeah.
And I think I like to throw around the word experience quite a bit, but I'm gonna go and kind of count this as one of those like, well, experience was changed.
Yeah.
To the point where like the ride felt like a different ride to me, and the ride experience.
It feels like a GCI.
It's like completely,
and not just
different.
Because of the trains. You ride the way that the track
pacing
and the pacing feels. It became something totally different.
So I would count that. Would everyone count that? Would you count that, Sven?
Yeah, I would agree on that. But I do think that for some other wooden coasters, like retracking is normal because
that's part of the
wooden thing.
And sometimes when you retract something, you alter something about the ride experience that maybe wasn't working that great.
So are we talking like when the boss took out the final helix and turned it into just a turn, or when
Timberwolf did the same?
I would not say it's a different credit because same rolling stock overtaken now it's a part of the track.
Too much of the ride has remained.
If anything, it's less of a credit than it used to be.
If anything, there's not as much to it ananymore.
So I would not count that.
Or Boulder Dash Boulder Dash had like a trick track section or something that they had Michigan's Adventure.
Yes, I wouldn't count that as another credit.
Or
this is going to be.
I know there was some part of Boulder Dash that it was problematic. It was a huge stress point area, so they ended up just doing a completely different element where that was because they were tired of fixing it.
It wasn't like a double up or something.
Yeah, they did something. I mean, and sometimes it makes the ride better and more comfortable. Other times it's just the park trying to keep on top of their maintenance budget. Rides like Hercules at Dorney Park or the Rattler at Fiesta Texas went through really dramatic changes over the course of their existence, and I don't know if anyone at any point had advocated that like riding the Rattler in 1992 with the original drop and the original second like double downhill and stuff was a different credit than what was demolished for Iron Rattler, but that you could certainly say that the rides scarcely resembled each other by the end of that because of how dramatically they changed over the course of their existence.
And so what about what they are doing to White Lightning right now?
Well, I would say if White Lightning got it completely... If it was completely steel track, I would say, well, that's almost... I would say that's a different track.
If they retract the whole thing...
But it's only like a very little bit. So as of right now, no. But if
haven't even ridden it yet.
But if it's going to be completely redone like that, then I would say yes.
Yeah.
Even though the trains aren't the
Even
same.
if like RMC came in and
because Piton kept the same train but on the track, right? So I would go with that approach and say like, well, that's how the ride was changed. But I do want to bring up backwards trains. Like Batman backwards or Colossus backwards. I know they're kind of different because Batman backwards uses a B&M chassis and just takes off one row and flips all the seats. It's where like Colossus backwards ran B&M Cyclone trains, which are really unique. So I counted Colossus backwards as a separate credit because the trains were so different.
Which Colossus are you talking about?
At Magic Mountain.
Magic Mountain, the original.
During October, they used to take one side and put the Cyclone
different
train on
Colossus
it.
in my mind. So I was
sorry.
Hyde Park, Thor Park.
Yeah.
God,
for years, Magic Mountain would close Cyclone, back when we had Cyclone, they would close it in October just to put the train.
I think that
the two trains.
They didn't do Batman. Sorry, they didn't do Colossus backwards till after they closed Cyclone. And then they moved the trains over.
I thought it was well, maybe because I feel like I can remember.
No, because I remember it being marketed like.
I feel like I can remember them doing that when I was a kid, though. Like when Cyclone was still open, and like they would just close Cyclone for the winter.
Or they may have just taken one, or they may have just taken 2 of the 3.
Or maybe they took
Because I remember Cyclone was running coincidentally with the Halloween event.
Cyclone's ridership was so terrible that like since the Halloween time was still like the off season before Haunt and stuff got like really, really big with theme parks. Mm-hmm. I can recall them just closing Cyclone for
Fright Fest didn't really
time,
start picking up to like 08 or 09.
And using the rolling stock for Colossus.
But yeah, anyway, so since it's a different train, completely different experience, I counted that as a separate credit backwards. And I would do the same for Batman, because even though it's the same chassis, the ride experience, I mean, I don't even know who thought was good.
Riding Batman backwards is hair-raising.
Incredibly crazy compared to doing it forward.
That was a thing. They're not doing it right now. I mean, I don't even know where the chassis is.
I mean, it probably had...
But my God, that was a lot.
Would you count that as just separate credits?
Yeah, I did. I have Batman the Ride at Six Flags Over Georgia twice. One for forward and one with the backward chassis. But if I rode the backward chassis on a different Batman again...
I would not count it.
I wouldn't count it a second time.
Because they built a special train for it.
Yeah.
The Diggas can just plug in.
His eyebrows are going all over the place.
He's like, really?
Yeah.
Sven is winning this one because I am like...
Yeah, it's the track.
I focus on the track.
I said it's a trap, and I was like...
and the train, it doesn't change the ride type. It's still an inverted coaster for Batman.
Well, we think of it as like a backwards coaster is... A ride that runs backwards is a unique classification from a standard sit-down coaster, I guess is what we're trying to say.
I understand people that do it, but I don't count it.
For me, riding Batman backwards was a more dramatic change in experience than Vortex at Great America becoming Patriot.
I have to say, though, that for me, I have the Swarm that I rode backwards.
Is it one...
That was one train.
If it's one train, I would say it's one credit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but...
I wrote it as that's one credit.
It's still a backwards experience then, so then you should count it.
It was
like Colossus had a completely different kind of train for running backwards.
The chassis didn't change.
Well, it had a different train for those seasons because the backward seats were changed.
I thought this. Well, didn't they just take the seats off and spin them around?
It's not like it's a different manufacturer came in and gave a different train.
Yeah, for me, it was. I didn't know any different.
I didn't manufacturer's train.
I never once thought to count Swarm as 2 credits because what I was riding was the same set of rolling stock.
The same.
If they had one forward train and one backward train, I would count it as 2 credits. But because it was 2 trains that had forward and backward seats, I counted it as 1.
I would agree with that
statement. So Hollywood
statement.
Dream, you count as 2 credits.
It's 2 credits.
Backdrop.
Yes, we do.
Also, there's 2 queues, 2 stations. It's all
2 marquees.
It's a completely different setup.
The backdrop was launched as its own attraction.
Even though backdrop was one train, there's like 4 trains the other side.
We had to wait in line for it twice. We're counting it. It took it was a 2-hour process.
Well, on that topic, we have. Okay, so you would count as 1 coaster, Sven?
Yes.
Swarm.
Okay, but I guess it kind of comes down to the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to add any more tallies to this.
Yeah.
But there is one. What am I thinking of? We're going to talk about the backward seating.
Well, I was thinking like in Vertigo, for example, is one where
that's just
the
same train.
It's that's what. Well, when I think of Swarm being 1 credit, Swarm was 1 credit for the same reason that in Vertigo is 1 credit, regardless of which way you're facing when the ride starts.
So that's a suspended boomerang, right?
Yeah, like Diabolic.
Yes. Diabolic.
Yeah.
3 ups.
And the one and Bagatelle.
I think in general, boomerangs doesn't even apply if it's backwards or forwards because you do the track in both directions.
Anyway. Yeah.
So whether you start off backwards or start off forwards, this coach experience includes no matter which seat you're in, both backwards and forwards.
Yeah,
so ride experience, it should never be 2 credits.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I prefer.
I also had the. It used to be called Tornado, and now it's called something in Polish. But in Legendia, it is also
Tornado.
the last seat that has
the Socket, the French-built looping coaster that has the backward seats. Yeah, Socket.
So the last part of the train is where you sit towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do it backwards, but still, again, that's 1 credit for me.
1 credit. Thunderation at Silver Dollar City used to have 2 vehicles that were turned backward.
I think it's intense.
And I'm so sad that it's not that way anymore. It was great.
It would have still been more.
That's interesting. Also, remember when they put on Blue Fire the extreme
spinning car
cards?
That would have been a separate credit.
I would have counted that as its own credit.
Significantly, train type is different.
Yeah, I think I agree there.
Yeah, I couldn't in good conscience ride a Blue Fire clone that spun and say that it wasn't a different
I'm going to say this. At that point, it's like, well, on Swarm, the train is literally the exact same vehicle except for turned around.
Yeah.
But on Blue Fire running a time traveler car, it's like, well, this is a completely different kind of train.
Chassis change.
You know, like the car is different.
And another classification for the ride,
Yeah, then it becomes a vastly different kind of ride.
I guess we're on the same page there.
Look, if somebody held me down and said I had to count forward and backward Swarm as 2 credits, I would. But I don't need to. I don't worry myself.
I don't know why you're playing this game. Like, if someone like put my head in the water for 20 minutes, like,
what I'm saying is that if somebody had a good enough, like, if somebody tried to use my own logic against me and say that Swarm had to be 2 credits because Batman backward,
but then we have Momonga
credit.
Loop, which uses
Momonga Standing Loop Coaster.
Momonga Standing Loop Coaster uses the same ride layout. Mm-hmm. Has 2 stations that slide over.
Yeah.
1 backwards, 1 forward.
One standing, one
standing,
one. Well, then that one's like Hollywood Dream.
So that's 2 credits.
Where you get the sit down
Which park
credit.
is this again?
This is at Yomiuri Land, which is in Tokyo, and in 1979 they built their looping coaster from Togo with 2 sit down trains, and then in 1982 they purchased one of the very first stand up coaster trains from Togo and put it on their existing looping coaster. So for me, from 1973 until they added the stand-up coaster train, it was 1 credit. But once they added the stand-up coaster train, and it was like, I think it was marketed as it had a new name because it used to be Momonga Looping Coaster, and then it was renamed Momonga Standing and Loop Coaster to signify the change.
Because again, that's like Patriot almost.
Yeah.
Except for it existing in 2 timelines, where there's a stand-up timeline and a sit-down timeline, the timeline overlaps.
Yeah.
But then, if it opened with the 2 trains, would it have been
opened with 2 sit-down
2
trains.
credits? No, if it would have opened with 1 sit-down and 1 stand-up, how many credits?
Same
would
thing.
It be?
I think I would still count it as 2.
Yeah, because again, it comes down to the fact that like 2 trains coexist, but it's still completely different rolling stock.
I feel like we may not see anything like that. I don't know if there's an example of a ride that opened with 2 totally different classifications of train style. What's that one coaster? Isn't there like a launched family coaster somewhere that it's like a horse-drawn carriage theme where you have like motorcycle seats?
Yeah,
and
so there is
seats?
a Zamperla coaster
somewhere in Europe.
It's located in the Yunnan province of China, and it is like Pony Express and Knott's Berry Farm, but an extended layout with an extra helix. Or maybe in Shandong, either way. And then it has carriages where you sit down, and it has this umbrella horse.
There's one in Europe, too.
There's one in France, but I forgot about the park.
God, I'm pulling out the hard one here.
Well, that one's... I didn't know that about the Pony Express clone. So that one has sit-down seats
if I'm not
and bike
mistaken,
seats.
it's both as well.
But I guess that's the best example is that you will find parks that have 2 seating configurations on 1 train, and I count it as 1 credit. But if it had 1 seating configuration on 1 train... Like for Tron's case, there's been rumors that Walt Disney World will have an entire train
of just
sit down vehicles.
Why?
And then whole trains of all
because
motorbikes.
Americans cannot fit on Tron. They cannot even get into the trains. It becomes a thing.
I mean,
like
the vehicles are not the
easiest.
easiest. Like if you got to swing your leg over that damn thing to like sit in it. Not everybody can just do that, and I sympathize. So I imagine them either having a sit-down vehicle at the end of every train. In Shanghai, it's only at the end of 2 of 7 trains that have the sit-down vehicle. So we're thinking either every train, the 7th car, is a sit-down vehicle, or whole trains that are all sit-down vehicles and whole trains that are all bikes.
Well, if there's a whole train, are you going to count as separate credit?
Yeah.
Would you count as separate credit, Sven?
If the whole train is different?
Yeah, if the whole train is sit-down on Tron instead of motorbike, would you count it as a different credit?
It might be easier to answer once you ride Tron.
Yeah. It's hard to tell at this point, yeah.
Because technically we've done both. Because we've done the motorcycle vehicle and the sit-down vehicle. And the main reason that I will say
there's a whole train of just sit-down. It's a completely different ride.
The main reason I wouldn't count it is because it's the same train versus
because at that
two
point,
different trains.
At that point, it almost feels like a launched Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
Versus freaking Tron, where like
riding
you're launching
face
on a
first
motorcycle
on Tron versus sitting
it's a different game.
with your hands in your lap is like such a vastly different experience.
So I found the ride. It's Pioneer at OK Coral in France.
Oh, I love the name.
Yeah.
OK
And
Corral.
if you look at the pictures, I think it's more like how you described Hagrid, because they have a sit-down position on the horse.
I couldn't remember if it was like real, like, leaning yourself over on the horse vehicle versus sitting in the carriage.
But the train looks awesome, though.
Interesting.
Isn't it so cute?
Oh, okay. So this is actually different. These trains are different than the usual Samprilla motorbikes I can see.
Yeah.
Because they don't have any shin guards. The legs are not being held.
Yeah.
Good point, Sven.
Much more
it's
upright.
It's not Samprilla, it's Zero. So that's...
Zero. It's like a zero force.
Well, that answers all the questions. Okay, so what I mentioned earlier, that coaster in China is not the same then. My apologies for that.
This is such a cute looking coaster.
Oh, but in that case, I would not count it. It's like Hagrid. It's the same coaster, same credit.
So yeah, it's the seat, or the design of the seats are a little different. Like obviously in the carriage, they have like these big tall backrests and you're kind of leaning back. Whereas the horses, you're pitched forward a little.
Capacity's pretty poor though. It's like literally only 12 riders for a train.
This reminds me of the coaster of Crossbow. That was at the park in New Jersey for a while, and then it closed. It looks like a really similar layout, but with this super cute train.
Yeah. All right.
Where were we?
Let's see. We did that one.
This is fun. I'm enjoying this.
I
can't wait to listen back to this podcast.
There's one that I don't have an answer to.
I still agree with my own opinion.
And we're going to find an answer now. And that is for the Skyline attractions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
For like the Tidal Twister at SeaWorld San Diego.
The
or
Skywarp.
Harley Quinn at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. So I don't even know where to start.
One, obviously.
Neither have we.
Neither have we.
All that we've heard.
I've seen it run, though.
I've asked people, like, is it a credit? And they're like, what? It doesn't matter. It's garbage, is what it is. That's all I hear. They're like, I don't care to ask myself if it's a credit or not, because I would rather forget that I ever wrote it. I'm like, multiple people have said things of that nature.
What if we used deductive reasoning and looked at it and be like, well, yes or no? Because technically, unlike a regular Larson loop,
it's definitely better than a Larson loop.
The train is connected on both sides. So like it is like a really long train with seats on the ends, but nothing in.
Larson loops are just hubless Ferris wheels, really. You don't go anywhere. It's one circular vehicle inside of a ring, and the ring with the seats on it just spins, and that is your. Mm-hmm. That's
See, RCDB counts it, and I think
if you counted power coasters, maybe.
Is that like no, because it launches you. There's only wheels on the bottoms of the tracks. It's like one long train that is separated by.
Well, okay, so I would say if you counted power coasters, definitely, and even if you don't count power coasters, maybe.
Mm-hmm. What would you say?
I don't know. I would probably say yes. I think I would say yes because it's unique for now. If they sold like 30 of these things and they started popping up everywhere, I'd be like, well, I don't want to count it anymore because it's not interesting or unique.
Yeah, but it's a special argument, that one.
Well, I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to explain why. So the trains are connected on one side. So in the middle of the trains, they're connected.
It is one whole train.
It is one whole train,
super long,
with seats on the far ends of it.
Yeah.
But there is at all times a piece of the track that doesn't have anything on it.
Yeah.
The ride isn't continuously powered. There are little launches, tire-driven launches on the bottoms only.
Yeah, the tire drives are only in the stations.
So this machine needs to roll up against gravity, coast uphill, and coast downhill on a single rail coaster manufactured track by RMC in order to even complete this. So it is a train. It has separate points of propulsion. It's not proposed the entire ride. And it coasts uphill and downhill for extended periods of time once the train gets rolling. And I think that just makes the little launch coaster that looks really freaking weird.
It's also similar to like the Schwarzkopf Lhasa loops, which have been gone for a long time, but one of them reappeared in Russia recently. And it's kind of a similar concept. It's like a looping Schwarzkopf Bayern curve where it's got tire drives in the station, and I think halfway up the loop too, but somewhere along the way, the tire drives are not being used, and you're just riding on your own momentum. And because it's a Schwarzkopf looper, I would still want to count it, even if it's a powered coaster.
That makes me think of your description. Like, the way you describe it, I understand why you would count it as a coaster, but it also makes me think of a pirate ship. Mm-hmm. And then I was thinking, well, there used to be a special kind of pirate ship at Bobbejaanland.
Oh, yeah, the half-pipe looking one.
Yeah, which looked like a half-pipe, and it was also the tire launches that moved the pirate ship itself. So then...
Did you ride it?
Yes.
Yeah, but that is not a continuous track, though. If this were like...
True.
If this were a shuttle coaster or like, almost like a disco, I mean, we're not there yet, but then I would obviously say no. But this is like a continuous layout. One even has an inversion in it. Yeah. I mean, Tidal Twister has a full
you're describing,
Sven,
I would probably count it just because I'd never seen anything like it. And because it's so rare, that's when I start to feel like I want to count it.
Well, it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone now. So you wouldn't count it retroactively?
No.
No,
it's still a...
Because then it reminds me, it's like a launched butterfly.
Than a coaster.
Yeah.
But would you count Harley Quinn or Tidal Twister?
I think he's saying no.
I think I first need to write it.
Yeah.
But I might count it.
I swear that's what everyone said. They're like, oh, I'll write it and then decide if I count it. And then after they write it, they're like, that was terrible. I don't even care anymore. But literally, and both of them. I know people who've written both. The one.
I mean, I feel like RCDB doesn't even list half of the things icon credits, and this is listed as like tire propelled launch with 2 moments.
Yeah,
because I was thinking about my coaster definition, and then what I found interesting was that someone on European Coaster Kings, Bob Coaster, he said like, well, first of all, does it look like a coaster? So then I'm like, yeah, okay, with my track element, and then he said, does it feel like a coaster? Mm-hmm. And then I think that is good to use as an argument. Obviously, feeling something is subjective, but so I'd need to write it and then feel if it's more of a thrill ride or more of a coaster.
People do think about that a lot. Like when I talk about the Intamin First Gen Free Falls, the biggest argument against those being credits for people is that they don't feel like a coaster. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We're pretty close to there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so pretty much we have
layout alterations.
Another layout alteration that we forgot to talk about is actually Dododonpa.
Yeah, at Fuji-Q, where it went from having a top hat to a vertical loop, I guess
Maverick can also be in the same category.
Well, Maverick never upgraded with the inversion.
Nobody has that credit.
Okay.
Yeah,
the only one that has the credit are the water dummies that exploded during the barrel roll.
I think they ran like 5 trains through it. And
that's how that happened.
Would you have counted as 2 credits?
No, because
I probably would have died.
Hey, this is a serious
My brain would have started bleeding, and then...
So if I would have my head held underwater for 35 minutes, maybe it would have been...
Look, I never said anything about water.
No, I would have not counted because it's such a slight alteration. Yeah. I feel like at least 50% of the ride needs to be altered for it to be a new credit.
Drachenfire had its first corkscrew taken out. I don't think anybody who rode that ride before and after would argue.
Exactly. The majority of the ride is the exact same. And Dododonpa, I mean, Dododonpa got different rolling stock, which is the only argument that someone could make. And be like, well, different rolling stock and a different
There were people
element.
that we rode Dododonpa with the loop with who had ridden it before and didn't count it as a new credit.
But I would say no, personally.
But if someone did, I would be like, well, good for you that you were able to ride it before and after.
I mean, ride experience must be quite altered.
Awesome. That's a rare...
I think I would say yes, because...
Oh, wow.
You'd count it?
That's fun sketching up.
Because, again, it changes from a sit-down coaster to a looping coaster.
To a looping coaster. That's... Okay, so that is a classification
And it went from Leopard to OTSR.
Yeah, and now it has shoulder harnesses.
So, I can see your point. I personally still wouldn't do it because I feel like the trains are still really similar and you're still sitting down. And the inversion is such a small part of the ride. Like, it's just one element.
But, of course, maybe to someone who rode it before and after... If I had ridden it before, I would probably have a more informed idea of how I would feel.
Oh, totally. But, I mean, that's the whole point.
It's a moot point for us, because we'll, of course, never have ridden the before version, but really the takeaway from that is,
I respect
is always the launch, no matter what. So.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's one we hadn't discussed yet. And then one that's really funny that I don't think anyone even thinks about unless they have ridden one of these.
It's cycle railways.
Cycle railways.
Which are very popular in Japan. Going back to Yomiuri Land, which has Momonga standing and loop coaster, they have the first cycle railway that we rode in Japan.
Yeah, you go to Yomiuri Land, you eat a leaf with 4 credits or with 18.
Yeah, Yomiuri Land's got some interesting... Yeah, depending on how much of a whore you are, Yomiuri Land either has 4 credits, 5 credits, 6 credits.
Is that the one where you guys got stuck?
No, that's at Suzuka Circuit.
Suzuka
Circuit is another park. That's the park that has dual GP.
That's on my list for discussion a little bit. Yeah,
Suzuka Circuit either has 2 credits, 3 credits,
or
4 credits, or 5 credits, depending on how much of a whore you are. But we'll get to Suzuka Circuit more later.
Okay.
Because we went in there expecting 2 credits and we got 5. Your face right now.
Judging
I don't know.
so hard.
I'm not informed enough.
We'll let you. Okay, so
Cycle Railway.
But Cycle Railways, no.
Hear us out. This is not Roller Coaster Tycoon. This is not a vehicle ride that does not go up or down. The Cycle Railway at Yomiuri Land, as well as some of the other ones that we rode on the tour, have a chain lift. Individual vehicles. They have drops, inclines that are gravity powered, where you don't have to pedal your way up.
So imagine a roller coaster where there's actual roller coaster parts, and then there is turns that are completely flat to the point where the only way to navigate the turn is to bike on it. So this roller coaster has an actual lift hill, an actual drop at several points, by the way, and then an actual upcoasting part, and then you get to a moment where like the track is just like an S turn, and you have to physically bike yourself through that.
I think this is as much of a credit as like Arthur is, because part of it is powered by your legs, by pedal power, and then other parts are gravity powered, where momentum takes over. You go down the drop and then up the little hill. There's a little pop of airtime.
Yeah, it was wild. It took forever to get through.
We rode it because we were like,
how much
this
drop
is neat.
do I need to imagine?
It's a pretty shallow drop, but there is a drop and an incline.
Well, the drop I would say is at least the height of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So, like,
I have a video of it.
You drop at least 100% of the vehicle size down.
It's pretty shallow, but then again, you go up pretty high via the lift hill. And I mean, it's got all of the roller coaster hallmarks. It's got the pinch brakes. It's got block
the
systems.
one at Bobby Island again, also has a lift hill. So, but the rest of the track is pretty much...
There is one we rode.
We rode one
slightly
at
down
Park
in Yokohama,
and also one in Yokohama.
That only gives. We're just like
it's
you
just
went up a lift hill and then
it's
very
one
slight
very
incline.
gradual drop. Back
I don't
to
think
the
I counted those, but I definitely counted the one.
We might have counted. I can't even remember if we counted those. But the one at Yomiuri Land hits different because it's like a tubular steel family coaster with drops and dips and stuff.
This is definitely like up to interpretation zone.
Yeah,
where like you have
super
to ride
great
it
area.
and realize
case
like,
by case.
Oh damn, this is a coaster.
Yeah, case by case experience. I feel like the Yomiuri Land one, you could honestly not pedal, and it would take a really long time, but you could not pedal and still arrive back at the station by sheer gravity. And then you have the drops and that little airtime hills and stuff. Similar on that note is, in addition to dual GP at Suzuka Circuit, which that's a really fun ride. That one is you have a steering wheel and your car can do spin outs. It can do 360s and stuff on the initial portion of the ride, which is launched, and then it has a series of small launches that take you uphill. And then there's a series of drops that have magnetic brakes after each drop. And so that one I counted as 2 credits because it's 2 tracks. And it's like it's more than just a powered coaster, but a little odd to be considered a traditional coaster. So there's that. And then they have a family ride, which we rode it because we thought it was cute, not because we thought it was a credit at first. It's called Den Den Mushi, and it's a snail monorail type looking thing. And it has this little vehicle that's shaped like a snail. It has a motor inside, so I'm thinking like, okay, this is probably not going to count as a credit. But the whole ride, you get gradually higher and higher, and then you reach a point that's kind of obscured by trees, but there's a drop and an airtime hill, and the motor for the vehicle is really loud, so you can hear the motor as it's like pushing you slowly up the ride, and then the motor turns off when you get to the drop, and you go down up the little airtime hill, and then around a corner, and then the motor turns back on. and then you continue the rest of the way into the station. And so from that point,
but that had like mad hills.
Yeah,
like it did a lot of coaster stuff.
It was
and then
so
it just,
cute.
like,
and then we were like, oh my god, this is like a kiddie coaster.
Dark ride your way back.
Like it starts out as like a dark ride. Like it reminded me a lot of Blazing Fury and Fire in the Hole,
which are
at the
definitely
Hershey parks, which everyone counts those as credits. But it's like it's a motorized vehicle like that slowly takes you up, which it serves the purpose as like the lift hill of sorts. And then there's a coaster part at the end to get you back to the station. So that was another odd one. It was totally unique. Never ridden anything like it except for maybe those two at Hershey Parks. But I counted it just because I'm like, this is super unique. It's more than just like a powered coaster, like a Blauer Ensign, but it's maybe not quite a true coaster by some people's standards, but it was enough for me to count it. It's not on Roller Coaster Database at all, even though it's as much of a powered coaster as a hot rail powered coaster. So
I'm just laughing because I'm realizing that you're counting all the powered coasters except the rail powered coasters.
Yes. That's really my point. I'm not trying to count the powered coasters that are common or easy or highly accessible.
You need to count them.
But they have regular tracks.
Yeah. Well, Den Mushi had regular track.
I know, but
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we're gonna.
That's the thing. If I was counting powered coasters from the time I was a child, then like yeah, probably. Now I'm just not really like worried about it. So I'm like I'm gonna count the really oddball ones.
I don't think there's that many you've written that you cannot go
Yeah.
back and find them again.
Exactly.
I mean, I could,
Just
but I
go
don't need
back,
more credits.
count
Like
them.
I really
Yes,
don't.
you do.
Like, I'm not
you
trying.
just count them.
No, I don't.
What he does count is Intamin Free
first
Falls.
generation free falls. Those ones I went back. I have written 5. Sven is done with my shit.
I thought we were on the same page for most of things, but here you.
This
well,
is why
not
the
because
end
Have
of
you
it
even
is-
written
Free
one?
Fall, but
Yeah, he's written the one in Italy, right?
no,
The
haven't
Hollywood
written
Tower
one, no.
Terror thingy.
You haven't written one.
no.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I'm not laughing because that one that you consider it a credit. I'm laughing because you're considering credit and not powered coasters. But
I know.
okay,
Sven
explain.
takes it-
Why
Okay,
is
for
it-
me,
why
it's-
is the
okay.
Sven
instrument
takes a
credit?
shot.
Okay, if you want a definitive, if it has a hot rail.
Okay, what does hot rail mean?
A hot rail is like how Blauer Ensigns work. It's an engine with a tire in it inside of the train, and the
generates
tire rolls on the hot rail, which is the center flat rail in the middle of the track bed, and that's what propels the ride. I don't count those. There you go. Why? It's pure superstition.
Okay, but I will say that Intamin Free Falls should be counted because they're literally roller coasters.
Yeah.
Except for like you're laying on the track.
Yeah.
So like, for all intents and purposes, are Flying Dutchmans where you fall the other way.
Yeah, people have been like, people want to take us to task about free falls on Instagram, but I bring it up like every few months, and every
People are
month
starting to agree,
it gets
though.
easier and easier and easier for me to convince people that they're coasters.
Okay.
This was the Japan trip for us was eye-opening because it was when we really started to ask ourselves what makes a coaster. Riding things like the cycle railways and bob carts.
Yeah, for the record, this is only a thing in Japan. Like, Japan has the weirdest amusement
Japan
rides.
has all of these gray area things that may or may not be coasters by your consideration. There's 4 Intamin free falls in Japan still. I think there's one in Tokyo Summerland that may or may not have been demolished, but there's at least 3 for sure that are operating, and we rode 2 of them. And we rode the one at Nagashima Spa Land, and it had been the first time that I'd ridden a new freefall coaster in a while, or an Intamin freefall, and I was like, I guess because we were already in the mindset of thinking about coasters on like a case-by-case, piece-by-piece level of like, do we count this a coaster because we have always counted it as a coaster? Do we not count it as a coaster because someone told us not to? Do we not count it as a coaster because it wasn't marketed as a coaster when it opened? I mean, obviously, we know that Larson Loops aren't coasters, even though Six Flags told us that they are. We know that Wonder Mountain Guardian at Canada's Wonderland is a coaster, even though they didn't market it as one. So we went into Nagashima Spa
Well,
Land.
Sven, actually, on that topic of Guardian, Sven put it on the list. Do you count it, Sven, as a coaster?
You guys put it on the list, but I counted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, that
I'll
was
put it
one
on
where
the
we
list.
thought it was like a basic Trial Tech dark ride until they started building it, and it's like, oh, it has a lift hill, it has drops, it's a coaster. Like, Even the dark ride portion is like propelled.
Yeah, we all counted. Okay.
But for us, for free falls, we thought about it, and I'm like, it's one of those like walks like a duck, quacks like a duck thing. For a lot of people, free falls are not credits because they don't feel like a coaster. But I'm like, once you ride a certain number of, X2 doesn't fucking feel like a coaster either. Like, it feels like an aneurysm, but you know what? It's a coaster. So we're not. I'm not going to pigeonhole a free fall ride.
Yeah, because the things that X2 does is really like a flat ride, except for it's on a roller coaster.
Yeah, like when we rode Danaconda, I'm not going to say, well, that's not a credit because it doesn't feel like a coaster. It feels like an airplane crash. Well, it's still a credit. It's still a coaster.
Danaconda really was.
So,
like, if there was like a level, like you have this level like dark ride, flat ride, roller coaster. There's a level above that.
There's Danaconda. Danaconda is a super credit because it's a roller coaster and a flat ride.
Counts as 50 credits.
Danaconda is a credit for every time you ride it.
For every flip on each side of the train, it's a credit.
But anyways, my point is that
don't overdo it.
They have a cable lift hill. I thought they had a chain lift, but someone corrected me on Instagram. Cable lift hill. Like Goliath at Wallaby Holland or Millennium Force or whatever. Anti-rollbacks, multiple vehicles. It's a circular system of ride where the vehicles, you dispatch multiple vehicles at a time. Yeah, it's a full circuit ride. It's as much for, you know what it was? When we were at Nagashima Spa Land and we rode an Ultra Twister and an Intamin Freefall on the same day. And we were like, if an Ultra Twister is a coaster, then I think a Freefall is a coaster too. Because their mode of operations is really quite similar. And again, with the technology that they used to make the free fall, it was clearly devised by a company that was building roller coasters and trying to invent a new type of attraction using roller coaster components. Some people are like, well, it's not a coaster because it's a drop tower.
I want to put it really simple. A vehicle, it's lifted to the top of a superstructure. It is pushed into a physical track where wheels lock in, guide wheels, guard wheels, stop wheels, all wheels,
road wheels.
And then it's literally dropped using gravity on a track that is literally a roller coaster track.
Yeah.
It slows down, and then it has a friction brake run in order to slow down this vehicle. So, like, by all intents and purposes, it's a roller coaster. Except for the seating position is strange compared to other roller coasters.
And someone said that, like, well, it's not a roller coaster because when it drops, it's not coasting. It's just a moment of free fall. And I'm like, well...
Neither do up-on coasters. Don't
Gravity Max is a coaster. It has a drop that is very similar to an Intamin free fall.
Yeah, but Gravity Max is a roller coaster because after it drops, it also, like, has... A vertical loop.
Yeah, but it's like, well, if Gravity Max had a drop and it went straight into the brake run, it would still be a credit because I think free falls are credits for the same reason.
Well, I understand why you count it as a credit, but personally, I would not count it because...
Says the guy who's never ridden one.
Babe, it's not about that.
True, but...
objectively...
Your opinion may not change when you do ride one. If you get to ride one. I don't know. Yeah. They're kind of... You could go to the one in Italy and attempt to
get there in Italy at some point. But,
I would hope that when you go to that park, it's open, but I don't. That park has got some odd stuff. So that park is full of maintenance nightmares because they have Diabolic and that Schwarzkopf City Jet.
So Sean, what about a butterfly?
Sven, you hurt my feelings early in this podcast when you were like sort of hinting at these and like acting like they weren't worthy of being considered a credit. But like, in all intents and purposes, just because it's not operated and you are your own operator, it is still a credit because, hear me out real quick, in America, you need to have a slide operator to operate your trapdoor water slide. In Europe, there are trapdoor water slides where you are your own operator and you press a button and it drops. So, in my opinion, that is an invalid argument. So, I want to say that a butterfly coaster, where you sit in a little butterfly, you press a button to start it, it lifts you to the top of the hill, and then it drops you like a boomerang coaster would, and you just go back and forth using only gravity, to make it all the way back to the stopping point. And that to me is just like a really simplified boomerang. It is to me a roller coaster, all intents and purposes.
And it's like, okay, so you have to have your friend push the button on the other side. We go to Disney World and we have friends who are ride operators, and they're the ones pushing the button for Big Thunder Mountain. So, like, it's the same thing.
So hopefully I calmly collected your thoughts. on this matter. Sven, argument.
I'm watching an on-ride of a butterfly because I'm going to be honest. I've never ridden one because I find them ridiculous.
Well, mister. Why don't you ride some of these things? And
I don't even want to ride it because I don't want it in my credit list. No, I don't count them.
Weird flex, but okay.
It seems like you're hating. Do you count them, babe?
Yeah.
Okay, so we count them.
I don't count the nautic jets, however.
Either, because
they're like half butterflies with a little boat.
From the track.
Yeah, the vehicle is
like
always attached to a tether. So for me, it's like it reminds me of those powered coasters that have the leashes. You know, the ones with like the maypole style ones that are powered by. Do you know what I'm talking about, Sven?
No.
It's a really old school style of. I mean, they'd have them at like family entertainment.
Oh, are you talking about like Magic Mike's, whatever? Like Minor Mike's, where like there's a single pole in the middle
and it's like a leash, and that it connects all of the power and stuff to the ride. I would expect you guys to count them because they're powered coasters just by a different style. But that's what they remind me of: is that the vehicles are tethered at all times. They're not actually detached. At any point, I mean, I guess the nautic jet can just completely flies off of the track and into a pond or whatever. Those are really fun. Mm-hmm. I would ride those all day, but I'm not enough of a coaster whore to count those. Not quite. If someone made a really convincing case, someone held my head underwater for half an hour. If someone waterboarded
for me, it's just like it looks like a playground thing, but. So hurt. I guess I understand why people count it, but there's another playground type of coaster at Park St. Paul.
So I don't want to let you go just yet. I'm really sorry, Sven. I have to go back to this argument real quick before we move on. Early in the episode, you defined a roller coaster as like a gravity component and rolling on an obvious roller coaster track. And you do count powered coasters, which have obvious roller coaster track, don't even necessarily have gravity components. How come this gravity component, regular roller coaster track,
it's not a regular roller coaster track.
Because it
looks more like a slide than anything else.
This is the baby ride.
Okay, it's fine.
That's my impression of you.
If anything, Sven
doesn't
at least
feel like a roller coaster.
This
looks like child play equipment.
Yeah. But then, so the thing at Park St. Paul is like, do you know at a playground you have like this steel cable? And then you have
like the little zip line type things.
Something like that. Well, they have that system, but then it's on a track.
Yeah, we have those here in Pigeon Forge. They're like an up and coming kind of like they call them zip line coasters or zip coasters. I don't count those.
I'm not
the
sure.
One Rowdy Bear Mountain.
That's a different kind.
Rowdy Bear Mountain, the cloud coasters. Track. Which you start and finish. It's a suspended coaster for all intents and purposes, except that the vehicles are just harnesses. But it has like a lift hill.
But that's
and
a completely
layout
still track. Though. What we're talking about is like the cable.
It's not a zipline coaster. You need to look it up. It's the téléphérique.
Oh yeah, okay.
That sounds easy to spell.
It's really more like a playground structure with that kind of system that I described before.
Oh, so the word is French for aerial tramway?
Yes.
Cool. I learned something. Sort of.
And okay. I wrote it, but I didn't include it in my coaster counter.
No, this I would not count.
If you could, I think it doesn't have a restraint system,
no.
right? You just
this is literally like a playground.
Yeah, you need to
like
hold on because you can just fly off if you want to.
Do you have playground zip lines in America?
Yeah, well, we used to.
Yeah, we have those a lot in where we're from. Yeah,
that looks kind of fun. That is. I don't think I could count it. I think
look, it's our banner from our website.
A little too.
No, I would not count it.
Oh, yeah, Park St. Paul, that's the one with the wild mouse coaster that killed someone recently. Yeah. Wasn't that its second offense? Didn't it do this?
It already killed. They killed 2 women in separate incidents.
Is it a second? Is it a different credit if you get thrown from the ride?
If you die twice, is it a credit?
If you die, is it a credit?
I want to know. Like, if I get thrown off of a coaster and land in a bush,
is it like a bonus level credit?
Can I count it as another credit? There's a newspaper clipping from the Santa Monica Pier back when they had their old wooden coaster about this woman who she was riding the wooden coaster and she fell and landed in the ocean and then swam back to shore. And she had like
that's a special.
She has some bruised ribs, and she's like, "That was fun, but I probably wouldn't do that again."
See, the woman at this park died, so she couldn't even.
So I guess we can't ask her until we die, and then we're on the other side, and then we can interview her and have a podcast then. But until then, we would assume that
it's not a credit. Nope, it is not a credit.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. So
another thing that
that's really fun though. I gotta do
another thing that some people mention is VR on a coaster.
Oh God.
I mean, it's still the same coaster. You're just wearing a headset.
Yeah,
exactly.
Crazy bats.
Not a size credit.
Crazy bats. Even I don't think
you know who's a crazy bat? Anyone that thinks it's supposed to be credit.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But like you were crazy bat.
Funny.
And then Air Galactica.
No,
it's still the same ride.
No, it's like, okay, so if I got prescription glasses because my eyes started messing with me, and then I wear a different kind of headwear while I'm riding this ride, it's not a new credit.
Riding a roller coaster with my eyes closed is not a different credit. So
no.
So no for Galactica.
Whoever commented that.
Mm-hmm. I don't agree.
Check out the article.
No VR.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So now we're
entering the funnest territory of all.
This is the oddball case-by-case department.
It is the, like, what the hell is this even?
We've talked about some of these.
There's a couple that I count. Which
Hang on. Do you want to go to the specific ones, or do you want to talk about one more type of ride that
oh my God, how can I forget?
We'll
do that one
all
first.
the time right now.
So, is a disco a credit?
Oh, yes.
And is a disco with hump a different
disco coasters are now on Coaster Counter, which launched a firestorm of controversy. Okay, this is my point about, like, being able to pad your credit with, like, a type of ride that is prevalent throughout the landscape.
If I really wanted to abuse it, I should have ridden more, because I feel like I always skip these at parks. I'm like, it's just not a disco. I don't like that.
I've ridden a couple of disco coasters, and they're fun, but I don't... it's the one thing I would feel so exhausted.
Also, for the life of me, I couldn't even remember which ones I've ridden and which ones I haven't.
I would feel exhausted. That's how I feel about old powered coasters, like some of the powered coasters that I've ridden or could have ridden and skipped because I didn't count them.
Disco
but whatever.
Now.
But yeah,
discos.
I could never, in good conscience,
because you count credits. You count power credits. So
yeah, I got a few disco coasters on my ride list.
Yeah, that you've ridden.
Not on my coaster counter.
But yeah,
okay.
If someone wanted to, I get the because so at Cedar Point, someone tried to say that Wicked Twister is not a credit, or that they don't consider it one, because it doesn't feel like a coaster. Which I'm like, there goes the F word again. Feel.
That makes no sense to me. That's
because they're like, well, why is Wicked Twister a coaster, but Pipe Scream, which is a disco coaster, is not, and they're in the same park. Cedar Point calls it a coaster.
I want to make one differentiation here. There are two kinds of discos. Well, there's technically more, but there's two kinds that we're going to talk about. There's the one that doesn't have a hill.
Yeah.
And there's one that does have a hill.
Yeah.
Now, if it does a hill, there is a moment at which you fly over that hill faster than any electric current can hump you over that hump, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, at that point, you're technically coasting, and you're technically, gravity is doing its thing. So, like, that argument, I will say, like, okay, you have something here. It's a power boomerang, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But if we're going to talk about the original discos, just the U-shaped ones, no way in hell. It's just a flat ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sven's Belgian pirate ship ride is more of a credit than those things, because at least that one, it's just tire drives.
It's like, I don't personally count the hump, but I will say I'll have a little more respect for those that do than I do for those that count all of them, you know?
You have respect for those?
I said a little bit more, okay? We're just not saying...
I can sympathize that it's like, well, it's a powered spinning coaster, that's a shuttle coaster, whatever.
Honestly, I couldn't find any real good arguments from people that were discussing about these kinds of rides. The best thing that I found about these rides is that there is a stand-up version with hill, Bison Perla. That thing looked crazy.
There was that was at Fun Spot Kissimmee. They had one. It was called Surf's Up. I never saw it.
Yeah, it's like a really small version, right?
Yeah. It's like a medium-sized one.
And is it gone?
But then it becomes a slippery slope, because then you've got like the Rockin' Tugs, which are the original discos are the Rockin' Tugs. Yeah. And then I'm just like, oh my God, no, I can't. Like, I'm not going.
That's Pandora's
I'm
box.
not going down the disco rabbit hole. If you want to count them, like, whatever. But then I'm going to assume that like half of your credits on your account are actually disco coasters, and I will judge you. So
yeah, I think all three of us agree that it's not. And again, like I said, it kind of comes down to like, are you going to look at it black and white and be like, this is, I count power coasters, for example. So like, if this is power coaster gravity, runs on the track, then I can see the argument. But personally, I lump it in with flat rides.
Yeah, on a practical level, there's just no dignity in it.
Because unlike regular power coasters that do stuff and go in circles,
it's
this
sad
is
though, because
really
it would add quite some coasters to my counter, but I agree.
I mean, Sven, you still can. You're the one that's doing it.
I mean, if you want to, we'll probably still love you.
I threw you quite a bone. I still respect you. So
no, but there are some nice ones out there. Like the one at Park.
The one at Park
is really
Streaks
beautiful.
Looks so pretty.
With the water
disco
effects, the fire effects.
Yeah.
The ones at Plopsa parks are also pretty well themed.
I love seeing parks use...
The one in America's good. America.
That was the first one I ever saw.
Like
with the hump.
That's really nice. Yeah.
I love seeing, like, Chessington World of Adventures, and I know other parks have done it where, like, they have the disco coaster with the hump, and the hump goes over, like, a major midway.
Yeah.
Some parks use it as just, like, the entrance. Like, Kings Island and Cedar Point both have disco coasters with the hump, and that's just where you enter the ride, which, of course, is, like, a very attractive setup. But, like, Chessington, we walked through a part of the park, and like we came out the other side, and we were under the disco coaster. I turned around, I'm like, oh, there's a disco here. Like, that's cool. We rode that one just because it's Chessington. There wasn't that much to do. And the mouse coaster was closed, and the spinner was closed. So we're like, well, let's ride this. But yeah, I didn't ride it and think to myself, like, oh, I'm going to count this as a credit. I think about all of the disco coasters that I chose not to ride because I just had better things to do. I'm like, then I'm just going to start leaving. If those are credits, I'm just leaving them on the table. I don't care. I've got better things to do than ride disco coasters.
Yeah.
Unless I'm somewhere that I visit all the time and I just really feel like riding one. But I haven't even ridden the one at Cedar Point. I can't be bothered to waste my time on Pipe Scream. Cedar Point, I can't even be bothered to ride half of the actual coasters at Cedar Point.
Where's the lie?
So... Yeah.
I just want to ride the coasters at Cedar Point, so...
Yeah. You're going to ride Pipe Scream
definitely one and done.
when you go to Cedar Point?
No, it's not a credit.
We'll see.
Also...
Although that Pipe Scream is kind of cool because it's got that different seating configuration. It's not the disc. I can't really do the disc ones anymore. The ones where you face outside, they make me ill. But the ones at Cedar Point and Kings Island are the skateboard-themed ones. So it's like the long rows of seats that face inward. That one I would be more inclined to do.
So now I want to dive into our last section of the episode. This section is quite unique because it's almost like all individual kind of examples.
These are our major case
and we'll
by
just kind of run through them a little bit faster just because of our time spent on this podcast.
We want to try to keep this under 2 hours, but we'll see.
So we'll start with a couple of water rides that are kind of split up in the industry. So we have Splash Mountain, Chapas, Dudley Do Rides, Ripsaw Falls. Those three are kind of all in the same kind of boat there. Do we count these?
Good pun.
How do we count these as credits? Yes or no?
No.
Sven, you don't count Chiapas, do you?
No.
No.
It's fine because I haven't counted Chapas.
I think we did.
I don't count Chapas because of the track system, but I do count Dudley because Dudley has like actual water coaster track.
Uses the Mack water coaster track bed. It's just a narrower gauge.
Because the drop, it's like you're completely in it.
To be honest with you, like, yeah, for me, okay, so I don't count powered coasters, but I am a credit whore when it comes to, like, flume rides that have a dry drop and then an incline. Like the log flume at Parka Streaks, Minier Express.
Yeah.
That has that coaster part where you go down and up, and I count it because of that. I decided to count it as a credit because that part feels like a water coaster.
Yeah, I count them too because I also count... I guess Chapas, I haven't even specifically counted
because it's got.
But I guess I should.
It has the uphill part and then it goes down again.
Yeah, because I count.
I feel like these
the
coasters,
one at Fiesta Texas.
Yeah,
and I also count Splash Mountain, which both have like uphill coasts on.
For me, these rides are so similar to the Mack Super Splashes. It feels so much like Atlantica Super Splash or Walrus Splash.
It feels
when it turns. Yeah, there's the F word again. Yeah. They're so similar in what
the F-word is a whole different meaning in our podcast. Yeah.
They're so similar in what they accomplish as far as the roller coaster bit. I've had people tell me they'll count Poseidon as a credit, but not Atlantica Super Splash because Atlantica Super Splash does not turn corners unless it's floating in the water. But for people who do count the power, the super splashes, I would think like, well, if I'm counting this, because I didn't used to count them. I counted the super splashes after I'd already ridden the one at Europa Park and the one at SeaWorld in Texas, and then decided to count them after the fact because I'm like, well, if I'm counting all of the Mack water coasters, like I don't see why not. And then I thought, well, if I'm counting these water coasters that just have straight up and down coasting parts, like why am I not counting the log flumes that are water coasters for a few seconds when they transfer to dry track, wheel assemblies, road wheels, up stops, down and up, gravity-powered moments. So then I'm like, okay. And then I went on my list and looked at the log flumes that I've been on that do this, and I'm like, well, there's not that many. I only added like 8 or 9 credits by the time I counted all of the flumes that coast upward, and then I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. I can still sleep better at night knowing I don't count powered coasters, and I'm not padding my credit count that way.
Now, how
gives
about
me leeway to count it in other ways.
what if a water ride doesn't coast uphill but uses very obvious coaster kind of track that is manufactured by Coma, for example, like Jurassic Park or Jurassic World?
Then shoot the chutes, which like a lot of them have like the dry turnaround and drop. Those I don't count. Those are just too.
Yeah, because I don't count
basic.
Jurassic Park because it doesn't coast uphill.
Yeah.
But I do count the log flumes that have the uphill parts.
Yeah, uphill coasting is the part where I feel like I can justify.
So, like in the water category, it needs to coast uphill in order to qualify.
So Fuga de Atlantida at Gardaland.
That's the one that has
that
like
one looks
the
to me like a
track
complete roller
bed,
coaster,
right?
where the whole thing is completely
Does that one
track,
coast uphill?
Except
at any
for
point?
basically it's coaster track until you drop. Then it's
because that one's another one that's not on Roller Coaster Database.
Does it go uphill at all?
No.
Then
it doesn't coast uphill?
That's not a credit for me.
That one's really because then the track bed for that one. Sven, do you count that one?
I do count it because the track
because it looks like Intamin track bed.
It is
like,
Intamin
like
track,
a hypercoaster
and then also
or something.
the turn at the top it's really rolling on the track there. And
well, yeah, I would definitely count that because, like I said before, I count Pilgrim's Plunge and I count Shoot the Rapids because of the later ride designs that they developed from that product line that are more coaster-like. So yeah, I would probably count that. I don't see why not. But Roller Coaster Database does not.
Now, there's another really fascinating water attraction. That is really... This seems to be... There's not as many people in our communities that have ridden this one, just because it's located in China. But Shanghai Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean Battle for the Sunken Treasure. That attraction is completely tracked.
Yeah.
It uses 3 kinds of track systems. There is a dual track for the majority of the ride that will pivot and split up in order to make the boat go backwards or forwards. The boat does not ever flow. Like the boat doesn't float. Just so everyone knows, the boat does not float.
Yeah.
The water is all scenic, right? And then there is the section of the ride where you are backwards. You get loaded into almost like a Mack-looking super splash structure. And you drop down, coast back uphill, pretty much like the middle of a Mack Super Splash basic model.
Yeah.
And then you splash down, and then you reconnect that track, and at the very end of the ride...
And then it spins you around.
And at the very end of the ride, there's another kind of track where, like, there is a track that lifts the boat out of the water and keeps the rest of the mechanism underneath the boat. So really, there's like 3 kinds of track on that, but the boat at no point ever flows freely. It's always controlled.
Yeah, it's not a flume in the sense
so to me, it's
of like a flume ride.
And it does the whole drop and coast.
The drop part is so fun. That was a surprise for us, and then I wrote it, and I'm like, wait a minute, it's like a...
Thank you to ruin the surprise, then.
Oh. You didn't know that already?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No. I never watched... Sorry. I just watched some parts of the on-ride, but...
We talked about it in other podcasts. So this means that you haven't listened to all of our podcasts.
Hey, shut up. You just don't remember everything.
Yes, I did.
We've talked about it in other podcasts.
Yeah, but it's fine. I don't remember everything Sven said at Fly podcast. Sven was just not like, oh, there's 2 entrances to the Fly area. And I was like, oh, crap, I completely forgot to even mention it last episode. You know, like, it happens. Sven, you're fine.
It's okay.
You're not even going to remember this anyways by the time you get there.
I'm sorry we ruined the roller coaster surprise for you on Pirates. But
yeah, well, there was we were watching the Imagineering story, and I really didn't know anything about the ride system of Rise of the Resistance. And then this major spoiler came in, and Sandra and I were like, "Oh fuck!
Oh no,
that ruined everything."
That's funny.
They talked about that. They talked about pirates on Imaginary Story too, didn't they? And at one point, I think they showed us. They showed the track bed for the coaster portion. So,
but yeah, I want to tell the whole world of people that haven't ridden it and are kind of trying to look at it objectively that I 100% think qualifies as a water coaster. And those who've ridden it who aren't sure, like, don't be afraid to count it because we count it.
Well, it's one of those things. If you count the Super Splash, if you count
the Coaster Kings, girl.
If you go to Europa Park and tell me that there's 2 water coasters, then Pirates Shanghai is a water coaster. If you go to Europa Park and say there's only 1 water coaster, then whatever, you're wrong.
Okay, next.
So yeah, that's that. Next we have Droomvlucht, Dreamflight for those who don't speak Dutch.
At Efteling.
Efteling. It is literally a Vekoma SLC. That is really nice to see.
There's Sed's face. I was excited for the face you were going to make when we said this.
Sven
It's Arthur. It's a rudimentary Arthur, but Vekoma, did it a decade before, and it's amazing.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a coaster used to be Dark Ride, Gringotts. So, like...
Yeah.
I think the only argument for counting a coaster is the track, but besides that, it is a...
Well, what about the spiral part at the end?
It is definitely a hill. It's a coast all the way down.
It's a big lift hill and then a big drop.
The system that's on board of each train slows you down even. So it's...
It has track-mounted brakes, doesn't it?
Not sure.
I think it's... we were very curious about this.
Well, we wrote it, and we were like,
we were
wow.
Looking, when I wrote it in 2013, I didn't count it. But then when Sean and I wrote it together, and I'm like, oh, it's basically Arthur. Like, if you count Arthur,
an older version of
there's no reason not to count this. TBH.
I still consider it more as a dark ride than a coaster, though.
But Arthur is also a dark ride. And also a coaster.
For me, Arthur is a coaster that has dark ride parts, while Dreamflight is a dark ride which has a coaster track, if that makes sense.
Okay, I see that point, and I respect that.
Arthur is a lot, or Dreamflight is, again, it's like, it's another Blazing Fury Fire in the Hole kind of thing, where, like, you're slowly going up the whole time, and it's a dark ride for all of that, and then the finale at the end is the part where it's a coaster, and in this case, it takes its way down fairly.
I think you guys count it more because of its uniqueness than of a...
Yeah, again, we definitely did a unique approach where like there are in-house made rides, I want to say, that are all such unique cases that it really just comes down. There's no classification for these. And so, like, either it is a coaster because of what you believe in, or it's not a coaster.
But so then, Dreamflight you count as a coaster. Then you should also count Peter Pan's Flight as a coaster for me.
We were going to talk about that one next.
No, because I feel like Peter Pan has a different kind of coaster track. Different kind of track.
It's a single rail. There are single rail coasters out there.
Yeah, but you don't call Harley Quinn a child twister, sir, so I don't want to hear it.
Well, he hasn't ridden them yet. But... So you're counting Peter Pan's Flight as a credit?
I'm not counting it. No. I'm not counting it. I'm
just like, do not think of me like that.
Because I remember that there's one part where you go down, and you also get slowed down because of the ride system. That's exactly the same that happens at Dreamflight when you go down in the spiral.
Yeah, but I feel like Peter Pan is controlled like the entire time, even on the drop. It's where like Dreamflight, I really feel like I'm coasting down that helix. It's like I'm starting to haul
really
ass.
Let's go.
And there is no moment on Peter Pan where it really lets go. It's just that your train is super heavy, so when you go down a little dip, like even though you're powered the entire time, it feels like
when you go down the drop on those, or like on Alice in Wonderland in Anaheim, where like you're coasting down, and it's like you hear the engine compensating for the momentum that you would have if kinetic energy was allowed to take over.
Yeah, I also don't count E.T., which E.T. is almost... No, it's kind of like the suspended monorail thing. It's like, so monorails go downhill, but I don't count... because with that reasoning, I could totally count monorail at some of these parts.
We're going to draw the line there, because for us, it's like Dreamflight is a tall Vekoma SLC dark ride
where the superstructure is very roller coaster. I mean, that helix is literally like giant supports, SLC, like a thin version of SLC track that goes around the helix.
And it's like silent. You go around it and you're like, okay, so the roller coaster is just like doing its thing. Like gravity has taken over. There's brake fins. I remember now. There's like brake fins strategically placed around the helix, I think, so that you don't go too fast. Does that ring a bell? So that's what we're going.
I'm not sure if it's to slow you down or if it's more like to stop you when.
Oh, like a block?
Like a block section?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a block section.
Yeah. Well, yeah. For that one,
if it has a block, then it's a coaster.
Because Peter Pan isn't like a block section thing. That one is like the vehicles all have their little brains inside of them, and they just are self-monitoring the location of the other vehicles around them and can stop and go at will. If I'm not mistaken, I think Dreamflight's vehicles are only motorized for the positioning of the vehicles to face the scenes, kind of like Arthur. Whereas a vehicle like Peter Pan, it's like the mechanism, the communication that happens between the vehicle and the track is all programmed as far as like the vehicle's relationships to each other. And then it becomes like Test Track or Journey to the Center of the Earth, where it's like these are rides that can feel like roller coasters because they are fast and they're thrilling.
And they have a drop in some cases.
But these are very like extremely advanced programmed ride vehicles with track that communicate with the vehicle on like an electrical level constantly and are monitoring their relationship to each other at all times.
So I guess the jury's out for this. What we do count is Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Challenge.
Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Challenge at Hershey Park.
What is that kind of ride?
It is literally a roller coaster.
It's funny. It's a dark ride. It's a shooting dark ride, but it has a lift hill and a little drop, and then you hit the brakes, and then there's another lift hill and another drop.
And you hit the brakes, and another lift hill, another drop, hit the brakes, and in the meanwhile, you shoot everything. It's kind of a shooter.
And it's delightfully unnecessary.
But it's literally coaster track, literally coaster
the
trains
track
with
bed,
trains.
the vehicles. I remember getting into it thinking, like, what is this?
I feel like it's almost more of a coaster than Guardian, Wonder Mountain Guardian is. Yeah. Wonder Mountain Guardian has a one drop, and then it goes into the into the dark ride scenes and has a final finale.
A lot of people I talk to about Hershey Park count it.
Yeah, I've heard only thing people say like
best kept little secret about Hershey Park is that it's actually like this indoor coaster.
So Alex, did you ride Transdemonium at Park Asterix? The
dark ride?
The dark ride, yeah.
I rode it. I don't remember it.
Okay, because it makes me think a bit. I just watched an on-ride, and it makes me think a bit of... So what was cool about Transdemonium is that right before the end, they kind of built the station, but you're not really yet in the station.
Oh, it's like a fake out?
It's a fake station, and then you have a little bit of track with a little downhill, but it's very controlled before you go back into the rail station.
I'd have to ride it to decide it.
It looks real controlled, though. Yeah, you can't ride it anymore. Because I remember riding it.
Oh, wait, it's gone?
It's gone.
What?
Well, it looks very similar, except for that, like... Because it has, I'm looking now. It has tubular steel tracks.
When I wrote it in 2015, I feel like if it was enough to qualify as a credit for somebody in my group, we would have maybe been like we maybe would have talked about it.
But if you're saying the drop is super controlled, the drop, I mean, these Hershey Park vehicles are like 2-car trains that literally are all separated and navigate through these drops and then hit physical brakes, like pinch brakes.
Yeah, there's a difference between like a controlled drop where like for the entire coast, the vehicle mechanism is compensating for the act of gravity versus a ride like Reese's Challenge where like you crest the lift hill and go down the drop and then hit a brake run. So that's, for me, it's like if you've got drops and brake runs... That's kind of that's what it means for me. That's why like a free fall is a credit, but a powered coaster for me less so, if at all, because these vehicles are just steel boxes with wheels on them and brake fins, and the track takes care of the rest. So
now, are there any other coasters or attractions that are coming to your mind that you think are a good argument to make about yes, this is a credit, or like people count it, but no, it's not a credit?
I think we covered a lot of stuff.
I don't think there's much that people count that I would like be like, no, that's not credit. The closest thing I can think of is like a disco, where if someone starts counting like every Zamproa disco they've written, I'd be like, no, I don't trust your credit count anymore. It no longer valid.
There's maybe one interesting thing is that there are some people that I also saw from the comments that if they ride one Batman, then they've ridden them all.
Oh, that's bullshit.
No, I can keep on experience and say that, like...
Oh, okay.
No, but still, though, I mean, every Batman runs differently. There is ones with 7-car trains. There's ones that are mirrored. There is ones that have completely different theming.
Every clone is still its own installation. Yeah. Every installation is unique.
That's like saying boomerangs aren't credits.
So I'm like, I know what they say, if you've ridden one boomerang, you've ridden them all. Yes, on maybe a practice, like on a feeling level, you felt one boomerang, you felt them all, but like literally, these are different rides.
No, because then you also get to like, I think it's completely.
And not all boomerangs are the same. Not all SLCs are the same. We have ones that we love and ones that we hate. So, no,
I would definitely disagree with that. How about you, Sven?
Oh, I disagree too. Like, as I mentioned, it's you have two coasters standing there, so.
Yeah.
Not saying that it's not a coaster, well.
That's like saying you don't count racing coasters, but like really extreme. You don't count the mirror image coaster next to it, and you also wouldn't count the mirror image coaster at another park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whoever counted that, like, where's your credit count? Like a 10? Like, what else do you not count? Like,
yeah, I feel like every amusement park in the world has something that's either been cloned or is a clone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't think of many parks that every ride is just a completely unique ride layout and experience. And then, so what? So I go and ride a wacky worm, and I'm like, okay, that's it. I can't ride anymore. Like, none of the wacky worms I ride ever again will
speeds
count.
Up your time with these parks. Yeah. So you can hit them and quit them real quick with that strategy. But
if someone needed me to count discos, I'd be like, okay, I've ridden one.
I would literally rather you count every disco imaginable than not count clones of the same ride, different locations. Like, that is just complete BS.
Yeah.
And with that note,
at the end of the day, I feel like people just want to feel like they've ridden more to be part of the conversation. And to that I say, you're still part of the conversation regardless of what you've ridden. You're not more of an enthusiast.
Totally. Like, your enthusiasm...
Your love for roller coasters is not...
quote unquote, as an enthusiast, does not get altered by what you've ridden.
I was as much of an enthusiast now as I was when I was 5, and I'd only ridden like 5 coasters.
You know what? Yeah, when I was like a kid and I was on RCDB all effing day long, like from the time I got out of school till the time I went to bed, and I didn't even have 100 credits yet, I was almost more enthusiastic than I am now when I have way more credits.
Once you hit a certain number of credits.
Yeah, I think that... enthusiasts that have ridden a lot of coasters will look at certain coasters differently than enthusiasts that have ridden less coasters.
Yeah. We go through that a lot.
Very judgmental.
Our relationship,
which is not necessarily a blessing,
with
I'll be honest.
Coasters in the Ohio parks. Like, our whole Ohio episode was about how once you've been doing this a certain amount of time, you've covered a certain amount of ground and ridden a certain number of coasters, you start to crave different things. And a garden variety B&M hypercoaster doesn't feel as special as like a unique terrain aero coaster.
That is nice.
And you start to go to these parks for unique coasters, topography, manufacturers that aren't around anymore, and then the latest, cookie cutter production coaster doesn't feel valuable, even if it's really important to that individual park's lineup.
I want to add to that topic real quick and say that there's a lot of talk in the enthusiast community, especially here in the U.S., where Disney is considered to be some sort of like general public,
it's for
like
babies,
kid-friendly, whatever place.
Adults shouldn't go there.
And you know what? I'll be honest. Like, the more you ride roller coasters, the more you start realizing that the big box roller coasters are located in places that don't have their shit together, that don't operate very well. And then there's parks where, like, as far as I can see, there's detail, and I can really get immersed. And we have become such Disney people. Like, the more credits we get, the more we crave Disney Universal.
The more we go to Six Flags, the more we wish we were at Disney.
Which those parks have a better balance of thrill and theming.
People are like, I'm not going to Disney until I have kids, and then we'll only have a good time because our kids are having a good time. And I'm like, that's stupid. Like, Disney's literally for everyone.
Way more fun with our kids.
And loving Disney comes hand in hand with loving an immersive, beautiful theme park experience with decent food and nice atmosphere.
I just keep seeing the argument. I'm like, that's the dumbest argument.
I think taking... Go ahead.
I think you guys just need to move to Europe then.
Well,
because our parks are more about the theming and less about the most thrilling.
Oh, the balance is so much stronger.
Oh yeah, you can tell these people have never left the country because they wouldn't feel that way about Disney if they had, been to other parks outside.
Yeah, people are really trying to tell me that they're going to Europe and they're not going to Efteling, but they're going to like some other random park with credits. I'm like, you are full of shit. Like, what are you doing? That is very American to be like, well, Cedar Point's a favorite park, and I like concrete, and I like 300 feet stall.
Cedar Point has the best ride collection because they have so many coasters. I'm like, no.
But at the end of the day, like, people are different, and people count different coaster-wise.
Well, it's fine for people to be different, but when you try to tell me that, like, I'm a weirdo because I love Disney and because Disney theme parks are for babies, then I'm like, no, you're full of shit. Like, this is not the time for gatekeeping.
But so, how did we do, Sean?
Well, Sven, you did incredibly well. I'm not sure if you were trying to or not, but we were looking at Sven only counted 15 of our argument points. Alex counted 19. I counted 20.
Oh, wow.
So I am the biggest CreHo, but actually not even that much more than my husband.
Not that much more
I guess
than me.
that's not that bad.
I guess that 1 point is just
I was expecting to be the
coasters.
biggest CreHo anyway.
I guess that makes sense. I guess I don't know why I'm not surprised, because that's really the only difference for us is that Sean counts
That's true, because whenever we do our list, I'm always the one that adds the credit, the power credit to it.
There's things that you've convinced me on, like when talking about like Superman Escape from Krypton. I used to count Superman at Magic Mountain as 2 credits, 1 for each side, and then Sean was like, well, it's a backwards coaster now. New trains, new classification. Completely different feeling. The F word.
Well, yeah, you went from a lap bar super heavy
to a shoulder harness.
To a shoulder harness backwards facing. It was ever in both, and they're
because to be fair, I mean, when I wrote it, I was like, whoa, like, so this is not the Superman from my childhood.
4 credits?
Yeah. If you write
I only
both
had 3
sides.
because I only wrote one side forward.
Yeah, I wrote both sides forward and then wroed both sides backward.
Sven, you're judging eyes.
Sven, you count Lauer and signs. You can't judge me.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you are the winner, Sven.
Yeah,
you are more strict.
Yes,
but I have the lowest count, so.
Yeah, you could beef yours up if you really wanted to.
I mean, you would have the same number of credits as us if you started counting discos. That's the T.
Disco Belix check.
Yeah. This was fun, though.
This was fun. Yeah, hopefully we mentioned almost everything that people discussed.
Some people will be swearing at us at some point, so.
That's fine. People swear at us for all sorts of reasons.
Any sort of promotion is promotion.
We could be out here living our best life, like talking about on Instagram how we got married and then we like lost 150 followers. I'm like, okay, screw you.
But then you gained a lot new ones too, right?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, we posted our Instagram story like, hey, the Coaster Kings are married, and then like 150 people stopped following us. It's like, you know what? That's fine. Y'all get lost. Screw y'all. It's fine.
But the
y'all go
sweet
vote for Trump or something.
Still
whatever.
Here. Thank you.
Yeah.
And to thank you, we actually launched a web shop, so you can now purchase merch and wear us on you. Really, really exciting stuff, actually. Sven mentioned it in the Fly episode that we have launched Shop Coaster Kings. It is part of our website. Just go to coasterkings.com. Oh, sorry, thecoasterkings.com/shop or head to our homepage, click on shop in the menu. And then we have there an awesome built-in shop with actually nearly 500 options now for products. So we launched today, that we record this, which is the 17th of October, our new coaster line. We are now starting to get into really graphic design sort of things. We want to get this stuff out there before the holidays so you have a chance to get this for a loved one or for yourself as a little holiday treat before the end of the year. And we wanted to give you guys enough time to have it shipped to your house. We still have a lot coming. As of right now, every week for the next 6 weeks, we are launching 5 new designs that are inspired by either theme park landmarks or coasters. All have a bit of a theme. So stay tuned for that every week. Check back, buy your favorite merch. Really exciting stuff.
Support your starving artists.
And it's 2020, so everyone's struggling. So by all means, if you want to keep our site and our product going, we always appreciate the support. We didn't really want to do a Patreon because I don't really like the idea of people actually paying for subscription. I find it a bit of a weird money grab, personally.
It works for some stuff.
It works
Even
for
other
some
podcasts,
things,
it works. But not for
us, me, I'd rather
like,
sell something tangible that you can wear. You can have.
Plus, that you have parks that really lack merchandise about rides. So we're making it for you.
Yeah. So we have a lot of cool European stuff coming out as well. We're really excited with some of these designs. As of now, we just launched our first 5 pieces based on the Southeast, like some of your favorite attractions.
Southeast landmark coasters, 2 of which haven't even opened yet, but are
that
already
all have very fun alternative
highly
names,
anticipated and well loved just from the ground.
So shop Coast to Kings, thecoastkings.com/shop. Of course, leave a review about our podcast.
Yes.
Slander us online and tell us how we were so wrong about this credit that we counted.
Yes, please argue with us.
Support Sven's limited counting of his credits. And show
Team
us what you
Sven.
think on the social media.
Yes, Team
exactly.
Team
Sven.
rigidity.
Go ahead and post any comments on any social media or any of the podcast apps you may be listening to. And of course, we want to see you checking out our website for our articles. Anything else you want to do, ask any questions, reach out to any of our pages. We're always here. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.